Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Chillin' with the Villain. Are you ready to chill with the villain? Well, I hope you are, because we have a very exciting episode today, the classic wrestling review podcast, where we sit down, chill out, and watch some old classic wrestling, then review it for you, the I used to watch wrestling types. Today, we celebrate TNA Wrestling, Impact Wrestling, whatever you want to call it, on 1,000 episodes. Congratulations, TNA. To celebrate that, we're going to take it all the way back to June 19th, 2002, the first ever NWA TNA show. And of course, this is the first time we have ever covered TNA on Chillin' with the Villain. So why not start from the very beginning, the very first episode of TNA Wrestling. But before we go any further, allow me to introduce myself. You already know who I am, but I'm going to do it anyway. I am the one true villain, Marty Skull. And joining me today, he is my co-host and the producer of Chillin' with the Villain, Mr. Samuel Scott. Sam, I'm going to predict that for this episode, this was the first time you've ever watched any TNA action.
That is pretty much correct, my good man.
But I'm gonna guess it's not the first time you've watched some TNA.
Oh, for goodness sake!
Oh boy!
You could go back. You could have worked. You could have been on the commentary team back in 2002 for them with those kind of zingers. Yes, that's mostly true. Back in your UK wrestling days, when I used to go and see you, and I was a stooge, a plant who used to slap or throw chewing gum at. There's always the DVD guy, bootleg DVD guy. I bought I think it was Jeff Hardy DVD, like TNA DVD. I watched about 10 minutes of it and then moved on to something else.
Well, Jeff Hardy spent actually quite a long part of his career in TNA, which is pretty funny to think about. Even, I want to say Kurt Angle's run was longer in TNA than his initial WWE run, which is kind of crazy to think about. It's also kind of crazy to think about that we're doing the first ever TNA show, which was June 19th, 2002. So that's like 21 years ago now.
It's crazy to think about.
WCW was in business for what? 11 years, 12 years? Is that right? ECW was around for like 8 years. TNA has just outdone them all. So, and that whole time you never bothered to watch any of it.
Nope. Well, actually, to be fair, what was it even broadcast on in the UK?
In the UK, it had good distribution. It was on
really?
Challenge.
You were on Challenge.
I was on Challenge with multiple shows, but I also worked briefly for a cup of coffee for TNA with their British boot camp series. Myself and Spud,
Spud, I remember.
Essentially like a kind of like a Tough Enough reality type show for TNA. Mm-hmm. But maybe I'll get more into that as we go throughout the show.
I remember your nasty spill outside of the ring.
That's what everyone remembers from my time in TNA, when that guy did not catch me whatsoever. Maybe I should tell the story quickly now. So, TNA, Wembley Arena, I'm in a 6-person tag. It's myself and the Blossom Twins versus, I want to say, Victoria, Gail Kim, and a guy called Jesse something. The guy that he used to be with Robbie E. Jesse, big muscly guy. And at the time, I used to do this spot where I would do a tope, but through the corner, not the traditional through the ropes in the middle. I'd go through the corner post. Anyway, so, and bearing in mind, it's a 6-person tag. We've got like 5 minutes on TV. I'm like, okay, well, I want to try and get my best move in. So whatever happens, this Jesse guy gets knocked down to the ground and I'm getting ready for my dive. This story as well, you'll learn why I don't dive anymore. But I realized that Jesse, I think his name was Jesse, is like right next to the ring, like super close. And so I'm stood there waiting for him, thinking he's going to start walking back. And I'm like, come on, come on, come on. He's not walking back. And I'm stood there, we're on TV, it's Wembley Arena, and they used to do really big crowds in the UK. It was, probably 8,000 people there, maybe 10,000 even. And I think, well, I'm just going to have to go for it. I'm just going to have to run. And in my head, I'm like, I'll start. And hopefully once I'm coming towards him, he'll start to walk back to catch me. Anyway, sure enough, I run and I've got to commit to it as well. My tope through the corner wasn't like the ones you see when people just kind of cut it short and catch the guy. I have to really throw myself through the corner because there's obviously a lot more rope to clear when you're going through the corner. So I have to throw myself, and throw myself I did. Jesse did not move backwards at all, and I just went flying over him, completely flying over him, and smashed, boom, right into the barricade. It actually wasn't that bad. People thought I was injured from it, but I wasn't at all. I mean, it didn't feel pleasant, wasn't nice. But yeah, the guy did not walk back, didn't get in the right position to catch me. And obviously at the time, I was nowhere near as experienced as I was now. So had I been in that situation now, I would have changed it to maybe a baseball slide drop kick or something like that. But yeah, that's just inexperience. And it was funny as well because I felt like this Jesse guy was one of Dixie's favorites. So she kind of, not that she was blaming me, but she didn't want to blame him. So she was very much like, oh, you just went flying. You were just so amped up that you just went flying over him. And I'm like, well, I went flying over him because he's catching a dive and he stood next to the apron, like hands on the apron. Do you know what I mean? Like if someone's diving at you, it's your job to get in position to catch them. You know what I mean? So, and that's
talked about positioning a lot and how important it is before.
Yeah.
Like you go on about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very important. And that's all people seem to remember from my TNA run. And that's pretty much all I really did. What was funny about the whole TNA British Boot Camp thing is that they had Hogan on as I guess, judge or whatever it was. And Hogan loved me and wanted me to win. Just unfortunately, I think Dixie was infatuated with Spud. So ultimately, she made the decision, which in hindsight, I'm grateful for. It all worked out way better for me not starting with TNA then. But what was really funny is Hogan, when he was doing press and whatnot for the show, he kept saying, I can't believe how good all four guys and girls are. Like, they're better than our guys. They're better than our guys. Basically saying we were better than the TNA roster. And he kept getting told off and kept getting heat for it. Like, you can't keep saying that they're better than our wrestlers. He knows how to sell, Hogan, I guess. He knows how to sell something. But Hogan really loved me. In fact, my friend, Spud, he's a writer at WWE now. And Hogan was there not so long ago. And Hogan was asking about me. And, well, what's Marty up to and everything else? And I was like, Hogan remembers me? That's pretty crazy. But I guess we left an impression on him. But the whole thing, I didn't end up with a contract with TNA, even though they told us we were all going to get contracts. And somehow I did not. And at the time, I was quite bitter about it and disheartened and everything else. And actually, that sort of bitterness, I think that was the foundation for me to come up with the villain character. You know, use that kind of anger and fuel to come up with something new. So everything kind of happens for a reason. And then I remember actually years and years later, I was in Tokyo and I had a meeting with Scott D'Amore and Don Callis, who was running TNA at the time. And they basically wanted me to come to TNA and wanted to build the company around myself and a small handful of guys. I think it's when they first took power or whatever it was. And they basically laid this all out to me. And I was kind of like, guys, I'm under a contract, so I can't go anywhere right now. but that was kind of like I put the hat on the kind of TNA thing because they didn't offer me a contract before, and then if years later they're offering me to come in and they want me as a top spot,
Oh,
then,
gotcha.
then I'm kind of turning them down. You know what I mean? So kind of a full circle moment. But no, that was my small cup of coffee with TNA. Before we do get in the show, I do want to tell you about my weekend. I was in Arizona for the Arizona Wrestling Federation. Arizona, funny enough, the last time I was in Arizona was about 10 years ago, and it was for TNA, filming the British Boot Camp. Filming the British Boot Camp show. We did a TNA pay-per-view in Phoenix, but this weekend I was back in Phoenix. It's bloody hot in Phoenix. Florida feels like nothing compared to Phoenix. It was like 115 some days, 116. It was too much. But no, I had a really good time. I had a really fun match with a guy named Paradox. It was a small building because they had to run like their training facility essentially, but they packed it out. They were turning all these people away from the doors. There's a handful of fans that flew in to Arizona just to come watch me wrestle, which I was really, touched by. Very cool. But yeah, the fans were really awesome there. I put a little video on my Instagram this morning. So, and even more exciting than me wrestling there, I also, well, you know how much I love fried chicken sandwiches. That's kind of my jam, my thing. Have you ever heard of Raising Cane's before?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I don't think I've been to it. I get it mixed up with churches.
Yes. So the weekend before, I was doing autograph signing or convention in New Jersey, and one of my lovely followers, Cindy, was telling me about Raising Cane's. I was like, "Oh, fried chicken, huh?" She's like, "Oh, the sauce is so good." So okay, I'm gonna have to check that out. And then, funny enough, my hotel in Phoenix, right next to a Raising Cane's. I was like, "Wow, that's crazy." So I went there and, mwah, French kiss. That was just that was it was really, really good. So I'm excited to try them again. But
where would you rank it against Jollibee?
Jollibee. Oh, that's what we had. Jollibee was pretty good. I much preferred Raising Cane's though.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's funny because I put it on my Instagram and I thought it was awesome. And like I said, I'm kind of a snob when it comes to fried chicken sandwiches. Like I think the Popeyes chicken sandwich is really overrated.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it. And everyone was raving about it. I was so excited to try it. And I've tried it multiple times. Every time I'm like, eh. But the Raising Cane's I put up on my Instagram, and I had so many fans commenting and messaging saying, "Oh, it's overrated. It's overrated." I'm like, what? I thought this was awesome. So if you're listening to the podcast right now, tell me which fried chicken places I should check out. Obviously, ideally needs to be, well, I was going to say it needs to be chain restaurants so I can go to them, but I guess I travel, I can go anywhere. So tell me where I need to get my fried chicken from.
Mm-hmm.
On a different note, obviously last week's episode, we taped it a little bit in advance, and 10 minutes before we taped the show, we learned about the death of Terry Funk. And obviously I spoke about that on the show and everything else. And then I believe
then we wrapped up the video, didn't we? We wrapped up the recording.
It was the next day, I think, was it?
Yeah.
The next day,
it was, yeah.
We found out the news about Bray Wyatt's passing.
Mm-hmm.
So just a really shocking and sad, it almost seemed like a span of 24 hours.
Yeah.
Two sort of major deaths. And obviously they were both completely different from each other, different situations.
Mm-hmm.
So I did think, I wanted to bring up about Bray Wyatt passing. I almost thought that we needed to record something else for last week, but I figured it was best to just speak about it this week and give it the time that it deserved. Me personally, I never met Bray Wyatt, but I do have a lot of friends that are close or was close with Bray Wyatt, and they all said the same thing. And I've always heard the same thing, that Bray is just an awesome guy. It never seemed like anyone had anything bad to say about him, which is pretty unheard of in the wrestling business, as you can imagine. So when I heard the news about Bray Wyatt, it just truly, truly shocking, truly tragic, and just so sad. Like, just so, like, he has the family. I didn't realize this. I knew he had kids, but I didn't realize he had 4 kids. I just think, man, he's 36 years old. Way, way, way too young to pass away.
Yeah.
Just
yeah.
Just shocking. I did watch parts of SmackDown, and they were doing tributes for Bray Wyatt, and I thought that was really, really well done, and everything else. But yeah, just rest in peace, Bray Wyatt. Is just so sad and shocking. And I think I'd heard before that maybe he was dealing with some health issues, but nobody knew that it was that serious. Obviously, wasn't expecting him to pass away. So, and like I said, I'd never met him before, but as the people who listen to the podcast know, I'm very much into create, not hate, and me personally love to be creative, and so I was always just so impressed by Bray Wyatt's creativity and wanting to do something different. I thought my favorite sort of run of Bray Wyatt was the first incarnation of the Wyatt family. I thought was spot on. And it always, to me, I don't know why they stopped doing it. I always felt like that gimmick, he could have took it right to the top. In their time, they kind of gave him a bunch of different gimmick changes.
Yeah.
But to me, I was like, that's not broken. Like, why try and fix it? Himself with Brody Lee and Eric Rowan, easy for me to say. I just thought it was awesome. And I remember at the time, I wasn't really watching much WWE, but I saw a 6-man tag that the Wyatt family had with the Shield.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was absolutely phenomenal. I was like, whoa, this is not like any type of match I've seen in the WWE before. I was just blown away by it. So I was a real big fan of the Wyatt family. So, of course, it's one of those things where I don't really know what to say. Of course, my thoughts and prayers are with his family, and of course, his father, Mike Rotunda, one of your favorite wrestlers, IRS, and his brother, Bo Dallas, and I think his grandfather is Jack Mulligan. I think that's right. So he comes from a wrestling family, and just when someone passes away in the wrestling business, it just kind of hits everyone. It really does. It's just so sad. So just wanted to bring that up, but it's just no age to leave. But he's left a lot. He's left behind a
huge legacy in such a short span. Yeah,
huge legacy, huge impact on the business. So yeah, rest in peace, Bray Wyatt. So I guess we better get into the show.
Yep, let's just get onto it.
Okay, so NWA TNA. Basically, the year is 2002. In 2001, we've seen the deaths of ECW and WCW, and it seems like the WWF has got the monopoly on the business, which also meant there was lots of talents that are out there, big names, that didn't have jobs, because the only place to really work was the WWE or the WWF then. One of those talents that was not signed by the WWE was Jeff Jarrett, who had quite a big falling out with Vince McMahon, and the story is that he held him up for money if he was going to do a job to China. Big, long story. We don't have time to get into that. But anyway, Jeff and his father, famous promoter, territory promoter and wrestler Jerry Jarrett, and friend Bob Ryder, started floating around the idea of starting their own wrestling company, the NWA TNA, Total Nonstop Action, with the idea, at first, a concept which has never been done before, at least with wrestling, as far as I know, where, because they didn't have a TV deal, the idea was to run weekly pay-per-views, weekly 2-hour pay-per-views, and charge about $10 for them. So that was their kind of business structure at the beginning. Of course, this is not the history of TNA, but I just wanted to give a little bit of backstory to everything. TNA, I felt like came from this company before TNA called World Wrestling All Stars. Now, WWA was an Australian promotion which started up, I believe the guy's name, what was the promoter's name? I'm just fact checking that. Andrew McManus. There we go. Not Mick McManus, but Andrew McManus created the WWA, which basically was a promotion that was trying to take advantage of ECW and WCW sort of collapsing. So I had a lot of talents from both of them and guys from the WWF, and they would do tours and pay-per-views of Australia and Europe. And Jeff Jarrett was on these shows, and a bunch of other guys, Conan, Scott Steiner, Disco Inferno. And funny story about WWA, so they did tours of the UK, and my friend asked me if I wanted to go see a wrestling show. And I was like, okay. And he said, oh, it's not WWF though. I was like, oh, because I'd been to quite a few British wrestling shows, but they were like the tribute shows. So I don't know if people know this, but the UK loves tribute acts. So tribute bands,
talking about, actually.
Tribute Beatles, tribute Who, whatever it is. And so wrestling was so hot in the late 90s and early 2000s that the UK wrestling scene decided to kind of take advantage of that and basically do tribute wrestlers. So there was constantly a fake Undertaker,
yes, yep.
fake Kane, fake Mankind. I saw a fake Scotty 2 Hotty, fake Taz, all these fake Dudley Boys, whoever they could make, they did. And I saw quite a few of these shows as a kid. I saw fake X-Pac, fake Undertaker, all of them. What was really funny, I remember going to see a show and they had like the real Jake the Snake on the show, but then a fake Legion of Doom. So just really, really confusing. But either way, my friend said to me, that's a whole podcast within itself, the UK tributes. I'd love to get into that stuff.
I've been to some.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Who did you see?
For me, it was always The Undertaker.
The Underfaker, we would call him.
The Underfaker, yep.
Yeah.
And this is so brazen. Like they're on the poster and they'll say featuring The Undertaker, like special guest The Undertaker. It's just not The Undertaker.
I feel like I've heard arguments for it, but I think what I think is kind of sad is if parents, if they see that, a lot of them probably aren't going to be able to tell the difference, you know? They're not going to realize like this is not WWE.
Right.
So they tell their kids, oh, we're going to watch the wrestling. We're going to see The Undertaker. Kids all excited. They get there and it's not, I don't know. I don't really think that's very cool. I think a lot of the posters I've seen did say, you know, Sam Scott as The Undertaker or whatever. But then a lot of them didn't. A lot of them just said, The Undertaker's
straight
here.
up The Undertaker. Yeah.
Mankind's here. Or if it did have that, it'd be in very, very small letters like Samuel Scott as Mankind or whatever it was. But yeah, my friend invited me to a show, said it's not WWF. He said, oh, Road Dogg's going to be there and Scott Steiner. And I thought, oh, it's going to be one of these tribute shows. Like, I was like, well, they're probably not going to be there. But I just loved wrestling so much anyway that I wanted to go. I love going to watch these tribute shows because I just couldn't get enough wrestling. And we drove all the way to the NEC in Birmingham, and this was WWA. It was actually a massive production. Obviously, NEC, a massive arena, and it was just all the big stars that weren't in WWF. And I got to see Scott Steiner. I got to see Jeff Jarrett, Road Dogg, Grandmaster Sexay, Gangrel, Bret Hart. Bret Hart was on the show. This is actually the first time I met Bret. He wasn't wrestling. He was like the commissioner role, but I got Bret Hart's autograph and everything. It was really, really cool. And I was blown away because I was just expecting to see like a little small British wrestling indie show. And then I turn up and it's all these big stars. So it was really, really cool. And I think Jeff Jarrett being on these tours and seeing the type of business that WWA, World Wrestling All-Stars, were doing, I think that gave him the idea, like, you know what? Maybe I should be running these shows in the United States and trying to take advantage of all this talent that is out there. And I guess that brings us to the first show. As I said before, the date, June 19th, 2002. We're in Huntsville, Alabama at the Von Braun Center. There we go. The attendance is around 1,500. The weekly pay-per-view buy rate. This I really struggled to find, but I have like a rough estimate on the pay-per-view buys for this show. Sam, you want to give it a crack?
12,000.
Oh, pretty close. I've heard around 15,000. And apparently they needed to get around, I think it was either 40 or 50,000 to kind of be sustainable, which I felt like, I know wrestling was, well, it's 2002. It's still pretty hot, but a little bit on the decline. That seemed very ambitious to get like 50,000 for a 2-hour, $10 pay-per-view. I don't know. When I heard 15,000, I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. So, but anyway, let's get on the show. So, after a quick video package and pyros going off, we are introduced to our commentary team for the night. Ed Ferrara, who was previously a writer or booker with Vince Russo in WWF during the Attitude Era, and then later WCW. Don West and, of course, the Professor, Mike Tenay. They run down the rules for tonight's main event, which is a gauntlet for the gold. Basically, a Royal Rumble where it comes down to the final two, then it turns into a one-on-one match with the winner becoming the new NWA World Heavyweight Champion. So I think it should be worth noting that the company is TNA, Total Nonstop Action, but they've tied up with the NWA. So for quite the first 4 or 5 years of TNA, it was the NWA, TNA, and they had basically the titles and everything else from the NWA. Your ring announcer for tonight is Jeremy Bulrash, and they start the show here by bringing out a whole bunch of legends. Basically, I guess the concept for early TNA was they wanted to put a spotlight on tradition, but also the modern and new style, hence Total Nonstop Action. But honoring the past was a big deal for them. And obviously with the NWA, that kind of makes sense. I thought this was a very, very strange way to start the show. You called the company Total Nonstop Action, and they're going to start the show with like a parade of legends rather than a fast-paced match. I later found out whilst doing my research, I actually listened to Jeff Jarrett and Conrad Thompson do an episode on this very show, which, by the way, would be a great sort of accompany piece to this podcast. And basically, they had a dark match, and the ring broke, and they're going live on pay-per-view. So they're going live on pay-per-view, and the ropes are all slack, so they're having to fix that. So they're like, so this was supposed to be second on the show, supposed to start the show with a match, and they had to swap things around and everything else so they could fix the ropes on the ring. So from the start, TNA was having a few issues. But anyway, Jeremy Bulrash is in the ring, and he brings out sort of a bunch of former NWA superstars. We have Harley Race, Jackie Fargo, Bill Behrens, Dory Funk Jr., Bullet Bob Armstrong, a couple who I wasn't too sure who they were, Sarah Lee, I think, and Corsica Joe. I think they were promoters from back in the day. I'm not familiar with them. And then finally, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Steamboat gives a speech about how he respects all the legends and how the NWA World Heavyweight Championship is the biggest championship in all of professional wrestling. Out comes TNA founder Jeff Jarrett to kind of spoil the festivities, and he comes out and he says, "This is the biggest bunch of crap I've ever heard in my life. A battle royal to crown the world champion?" Basically complaining that the idea of having a battle royal to crown the world champion was a stupid idea. Jackie Fargo then takes the mic and basically tries to fire back at Jarrett. Again, doing my research, apparently Jackie Fargo, who, by the way, if you're unfamiliar with Jackie Fargo, he was a sort of big wrestling legend in the Memphis territory. That strut that you see a bunch of wrestlers do much like Jeff Jarrett does and
Yeah.
Ric Flair. Jackie Fargo was the guy that kind of at least made that famous, the Fargo strut. But apparently he's kind of drunk here. So, so he tries to fire back at Jarrett and he tells Jarrett to kiss his ass. And he says, you're going to wrestle in the first match tonight, which he was not supposed to say. He's trying to say that you're going to be the first entrant in the Gauntlet for the Gold. Right. So Jarrett has to kind of cover it up and grabs the microphone and says, I don't care if I'm the first entrant in the Battle Royal. That's fine with me. Just having to cover up completely. Next thing you know, boom, Ken Shamrock comes out, the world's most dangerous man.
Rico Shamrock.
The sideburns, rocking the side. I thought he looked more like Wolverine.
Yeah,
personally.
I guess. Yeah.
But Ken Shamrock comes out. What does Shamrock say? I agree. The Battle Royal does suck. It's like, what? Like
burying your own main event.
When it gets worse, because then Scott Hall comes out
and
says, I agree with all three of you. The Battle Royal does suck. I'm like, what is going on? This is the first TNA show. We're starting with this whole promo, and they're all saying that the booking sucks for TNA. I'm like, gee, what is going on here? But basically, this is the big promo to set up the main event for tonight, and it basically ends with, I think Scott Hall finishes it off. But yeah, we've started the show with the commentators coming out and talking, and now this big promo, and that basically sets us off from the get-go. I will say this, crowd goes nuts for Scott Hall.
Yeah.
He's wearing a t-shirt for a strip club. Called
Landing Strip.
The Landing Strip. I assume it's for a strip club anyway. So I thought that was pretty funny, kind of from the get-go. You're like, oh yeah, Scott's just doing whatever he wants to do. Yeah. But here, I think Shamrock had left the WWF in 2000, early 2000, or maybe late 99. It's the last time I kind of remember seeing him. Obviously, this is a few years later. It was pretty cool to see Ken Shamrock again, and he's looking a bit different. And I remember the first time I'd ever heard of TNA was in Power Slam magazine, and I saw a picture of Ken Shamrock putting Malice in the ankle lock, which obviously we'll get to in tonight's main event. And I remember seeing that thinking, oh, that's really cool. Like, and Shamrock looking like a badass with his, what would you call them? Sideburns, I guess. Wolverine sideburns.
Mutton chops.
Mutton chops, maybe. But yeah, this starting angle with the legends, and I will say this, Ricky Steamboat did a really good job with his promo and everything else. Yeah. Of course, Jeff Jarrett is up there from the get-go, and you know that's going to kind of be the theme for TNA. What did you think of this?
Ricky Steamboat ages really well.
Yes.
Really well. And
he still looks good now.
Yeah. So I agree with Jeff, right? It is a dumb, like, if the championship is on the line, it is a dumb stipulation or match type. But you're right, having three of like their biggest stars just go against their own booking. It's just, again, like it's true. Like, well, it's a matter of debate, but like it's kind of true what they're saying. But sometimes just saying what the crowd think and being like meta like that isn't always the best way to go for business. It was just such an odd thing to see, and it dragged. And so you said there was a couple of people you didn't know. I didn't know who most of them were. Obviously, I knew Ricky Steamboat, I knew Harley Race, Dory Funk Jr., but the rest, I had no idea what was going on.
Well,
that's going to be a running theme, by the way. I'm going to be asking you a lot of who is this, what's going on.
Okay, well, I mean, you know most of them. Bullet Bob Armstrong, he is the father of the Armstrongs, and the Armstrong that you might know is Road Dogg.
Yeah.
So that's his father. He was a big wrestling legend. Bill Barron is not a wrestler. He's like a wrestling agent. I think he's been around the business for years. I've dealt with him actually quite a lot. He used to be at a lot of Ring of Honor shows. Dory Funk Jr., that's Terry Funk's brother, former NWA world champion. So that pretty much covers them all. Harley Race, you said you know.
Yeah.
Jackie Fargo, I explained. So yeah, I definitely like the idea of mixing tradition with current product, and I think it's very important for us to kind of respect the tradition. And I think I think it's a clever idea to use legends in the right way, kind of unlike a lot of times you see on WWE. They went for a phase of bringing legends back to kind of embarrass them or disrespect them. That I don't really think is
No.
a great idea. But here, kind of honoring them. Obviously, they turned it into an angle with Jarrett. I don't know. I thought it was a cool thing to do, but I don't think it was a good idea to start the show with this. Definitely didn't think it was a good idea to start the show with the wrestlers saying that the booking sucks. Again, if it happened 10 weeks in, maybe it wouldn't be so bad.
Okay.
But it's like literally the first ever show and the first ever
First
segment.
thing you see. Yeah, the first segment.
And they're saying this sucks. So we're then introduced to the backstage interviewer, Goldilocks, who interviews the little person wrestler, Puppet the Psycho Dwarf. Obviously, TNA here is going to have a little person division, it seems. They don't call it that. They call it the midgets. They just call them that. So if I call them midgets at any point, it's because I'm referring to what TNA calls them.
It's definitely worth noting that this episode is, or this pay-per-view is what we call a time capsule.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Which is going to come up a lot. We should probably say that now.
A lot of the stuff on this show does not age well.
Yeah.
Does not age well.
Yep.
So we have our promo with Puppet the Psycho Dwarf. Here he says that the midgets fighting each other should start the show. And then he goes on this big rant about how when he came out of his mother, the doctor and his family all stood and stared and all this kind of stuff. It's kind of weird. He talks about midget blood. I don't know. But basically, as he's doing the promo, he's interrupted by a pissed off Jeff Jarrett who walks past him. And so basically, this was just to promote the, as they put it, not my words, theirs, the midget division in TNA. Before this, the WWE or WWF had tried a couple of times to have a little person division. They did one in 97, 98, but with WWE, it's always been the Mexican minis, as they call them. Mexican minis, sort of a big deal in Mexico. Still to this day they are. And they had, the only one I can really remember is Max Mini was kind of a deal in 97 and 98. And then I believe they tried again in 2005 or 6. I might be wrong on the year, but they called it the juniors division. So yeah, but of course, little person wrestling has been a big part of wrestling history.
Yep.
You see the old posters back in the day, or the old territory posters, it was like an attraction. They would have big letters on the poster, midget wrestling. In fact, you still see that now. There's a company called like the Micro Wrestling Federation. It's like a little person wrestling company, and they run like 300 shows a year. So it's clearly still an audience for this. But obviously, you can tell TNA is trying to be different here. They're trying to highlight the little people, and we're going to get to see some of that tonight. But before that, we see the first ever match of NWA TNA. We see the Flying Elvises of Jorge Estrada, Sonny Siaki, and Jimmy Yang defeat AJ Styles, Jerry Lynn, and Loki in 6 minutes and 20 seconds. Now, this was highlighting TNA's new concept, the X Division, which they would stick with even to this day. And I think this match, one of the first times we see AJ Styles on kind of a bigger platform. He did have a cup of coffee in the dying days of WCW. I think he was called Air Styles, maybe. I never really remember seeing him. And if he did wrestle for WCW, I think it was on like the B or C shows. Here he's heavily highlighted. Really, really fast-paced, fun. Really awesome match, actually. 6-man tag here. But my question coming out of this, the Flying Elvises?
So,
what are we doing here?
Right. They came out second as well. So you get Loki, who I've seen before. You get AJ Styles, who everyone knows. It's like, oh man, this is great. And Jerry Lynn, who we've talked about a couple of episodes ago. We think he's a great worker. We really like Jerry Lynn. So it starts off hot, right? And I'm like, who are they up against? And it goes to Flying Elvises. And they're all literally dressed like Elvis, but with cut-offs.
Yeah.
And I was just like, seeing the original three, Loki, AJ Styles, and Jerry Lynn come out kind of gave me, I was on a down, and I see them and it goes back up. It's like a little ray of sunshine, a little ray of hope. And then it's Flying Elvises that goes straight back to the bottom. Until the actual match itself, I should say. But yeah, just seeing the Flying Elvises, what the hell is that?
Clearly, well, I think the idea is, so obviously this show, we're going to see a lot of former WCW guys, former ECW, and former WWF. But at the same time, they obviously wanted to highlight a bunch of new talent, which I think is really good. They could not have had a show just full of ex-WWE guys or ex-WCW guys. Otherwise, people would say, oh, it's just the WCW rejects. So they're trying to highlight new talent. I guess in their heads, if they just started the show with all this talent that no one had ever seen before and they had no characters, then they feel like people would lose interest. So they want to give the guys more characters, which I'm totally up for and I totally understand.
Yeah.
But in 2002, giving guys like an Elvis impersonation gimmick is very, very, very odd. And what's crazy about it is this match ends up being really, really good. And I think it was a great way to highlight the X Division and what they wanted to get across from that. And for any of those, I'm sure people listening get what the X Division is supposed to be.
I don't.
But, okay, well, I'll explain to you then. So previously, companies have had like a cruiserweight division or a light heavyweight division. TNA's concept was basically have an X Division. I guess the X, I assume, stands for extreme. But the idea being that there's no weight limits. There's just no limits. So the belt is more about style rather than weight, which is kind of odd because style is obviously subjective.
Subjective, yes.
Right. It's like you have to wrestle a certain style to qualify for this belt. So basically all it was, really, it was a cruiserweight belt, but every now and then they could let a slightly bigger guy be involved. But it was the cruiserweight style of wrestling, basically like high-flying style of wrestling, or a more modern, more high-spot-driven style is basically what it was.
Okay, makes sense. If that is the case, then I feel like this match represented what that is going to be, or was at the time, like pretty well then, because I thought it was a very stylish match. It
is, and it's funny because I think if you ask like the typical fan about the first NWA TNA show, I think the first thing they'll remember is the Flying Elvises. So obviously it's stuck in people's heads. Pretty sure this gimmick only lasted for a few weeks or a few months or so. There's a guy in there, the most jacked guy in there out the Elvises, Sonny Siaki. I always thought he was going to become a really big star. He kind of looks like The Rock, like a slightly smaller version of The Rock, but he's super jacked. And for whatever reason, his career, I guess, just never really took off. I think he went on to wrestle for quite a few years after this and scrapped and dumped the Elvis gimmick, but always thought he was going to be a big star. But of course, in this match, if we're going to talk about big stars, obviously it's AJ Styles, still wrestling today and just one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. And even here, how young he looks, AJ, but even here, he's so young. He's obviously still pretty new to the business, but even here, he's still just so good and so crisp and makes everything look so easy. It's amazing how good AJ Styles has always been.
Yeah, he really is the phenomenal one. Like the whole thing was really good. But he is like one of those kind of wrestlers who just has the ability to hold everything together. It's kind of like exactly how Brett was in last week's episode against British Bulldog. British Bulldog himself is excellent, but like Brett's just like the glue, that holds it all together. Just like there's just something there, and I feel like AJ's the same. Just very, very good. But that's not also to discount everyone else involved. I don't want him to kind of overshadow, because do you want to know who actually, or could you guess who actually impressed me, who was surprising for me? Have a guess.
I'm going to say Loki.
No.
Okay. Oh, was it Jimmy Yang?
It was Jimmy Yang.
He looked awesome here.
He looked awesome. I've never seen him wrestle before. He is Jimmy Wang Wang, whatever. What was it? No good.
Yeah, Jimmy Wang Yang. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So who I've never seen wrestle, but obviously I have to bring it back to games. I think he just used to crop up on a loading screen in one of the SmackDown versus Raw games or whatever, and I just thought, oh, for God's sakes, so it's like a Asian cowboy, like redneck Asian guy. Or something,
Yeah.
Jimmy Wang Yang. I was like,
Correct.
for God's sake. So I've never seen him wrestle, and then he came out. For style, for exhibition, I thought his style of wrestling was like, it was really snappy and punchy, like very fast and strike heavy, not so high flying, but more, you get the Shining Wizards constantly. He just like thrashes people. Surprisingly, going from just seeing Jimmy Wang Yang with his cowboy hat, having no other understanding of what he could possibly be like, just seeing him from a loading screen, then actually seeing him wrestle shocked me in a very pleasant way. So he impressed me, but yeah, low key as well. But I've seen him before.
I think it's a case of the flying Elvises come out and you just kind of groan.
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
but then the match happens
and it shuts
you're like,
you up.
whoa! You're like,
Mm-hmm.
whoa!
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I thought this was a, no pun intended, phenomenal match. I think it was a great way to kick off TNA. I really wish this started off the show, but I would recommend to anyone listening to go out your way and watch this match, because I thought it was fast paced, no rest holds or anything else, no time to breathe, but it was total non-stop action. So I thought that was a really great way to kick off the show. That, just saying total non-stop action, we haven't discussed this yet. What do you think of the choice of name, TNA?
Yeah, so yeah, everything about this pay-per-view is just so emblematic of the era. It's so 2002.
It is.
You didn't mention that every time a segment ended and another one began, it has just like a little lock that ties it together. It just cuts to these women dancing in what looks like those elimination chamber pods, and they just have to the whole time in cages that you used to see in like clubs around that era. The whole thing just stinks of the time that it was, 2002, which is why we call it a time capsule pay-per-view. And the name, just like, what could they possibly call it to sum that up any better than just calling it TNA? Like, it's exactly what it is. It sucks, but every federation has a like an acronym, so WWF, World Wrestling Federation. TNA doesn't have federation. I thought A could be association, because like NWA, but no, it's just literally just tone. It doesn't even stop action. It doesn't even tell you it's wrestling.
No, it has no wrestling in the title. I just think I'll give it some negatives and I'll give it some positives. We'll start with the negatives. Why not, right? Like, having your company name as a pun is kind of, but that was all that Russo was about. Later in TNA, after a few months or so, they start a faction called Sports Entertainment Extreme.
Yeah.
Like,
of course they did.
I want to say Russo booked the Terry Invitational. What was it? The Terry Invitational Tournament. Was that it? Tit. Like, or tournament series tits or whatever it was. A whole bunch of these puns. It's just kind of like, I'll be honest with you, I didn't even really make the connection with, I didn't know what TNA meant until Test and Albert.
I was just going to say, didn't Test and Albert do this before?
They did, and like they were
2-3
TNA.
years before, yeah.
And I just thought they used their initials for the name, and then one of my friends said, oh, it means TNA, like tits and ass. I was like, oh.
Because Trish was their manager.
Right. So yeah, so TNA as a name, I will say, not too clever. But at the same time, it is quite memorable. And during this show, the fans, they're chanting TNA constantly. So it stuck and it worked. It's funny because years later, TNA kind of seemed to flip-flop with the name change. They were TNA, and then they were Impact Wrestling, and then I think they turned into maybe Global Force Wrestling for a minute, and maybe back to TNA, and now they've been Impact Wrestling for years. But it's funny because I feel like they've been in back for at least 5 or 6 years, maybe longer. And I feel like up until recently, most people just still called it TNA. But I feel like they've been Impact enough now where people are finally starting to actually refer to it as Impact. And that was the thing with WWF becoming WWE. I thought, oh, I'll never be able to change to WWE. But now I think it's been WWE longer than it was WWF. So, but now it's that seems to come pretty easy, WWE. But yeah, Impact, they obviously realized years later, we got to get rid of this TNA thing and let's go with Impact Wrestling. So
You mentioned Russo a lot. You said Ed, what was his name? The commentator?
Ed Ferrara.
Ed Ferrara was his writing partner back then. This TNA does seem to have Vince Russo's stink all over it. Is he in any way affiliated?
So I said about TNA sounding Russo-esque, but I don't think Russo was involved yet. He would later join as a writer, but right here, I don't think he's involved. Maybe he was helping out Jeff Jarrett somewhat, or maybe just giving him advice and throwing ideas, but I don't think he was actually involved yet.
Okay, it just seems like I don't know, the degree of trashiness just seems like right. Well, maybe they were like, "Hey, Vince, we've got something that's going to be right up your street." You took one look at this pay-per-view. It's like I'm there.
So, we see Ed Ferrara on the show,
right?
And
is he the one who looks like Gary Oldman in True Romance, or is he the one in the Hawaiian shirt? Looks like Jeff Capes in a Hawaiian shirt.
That's Dom West in the Hawaiian shirt. Dom West was famous for doing the home shopping networks. You know, when you have the guy on there and they're selling stuff and everything else. He was famous for his crazy style of selling stuff on home shopping networks. You heard his commentary going, crazy. And he did it sort of all over the top. He kind of became famous for that. Somehow Jeff Jarrett became friends with him, I guess, and got him on board to be a commentator. So this show, I'm pretty sure, is the first time Don West had ever done commentary. And I don't even know. So
he came through from TV?
Correct, yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I don't even think he was much of a wrestling fan. Ed Ferrara, on the other hand, he had been a writer with, as I said, with Russo in the WWF and WCW. He'd never been a commentator before, as far as I know. But we have him being a commentator here, and he comes out with some whoppers. I will say this, he looks ridiculous.
Yeah.
The dreadlocks, he's wearing leather pants, leather jacket. I don't know, there's something about him that just kind of looks like slimy and just like, I don't know. But he comes out with some whopper lines, including, I think it's this one, because the next match we see the little people match. Tio defeats Hollywood in 2 minutes and 48 seconds. And I believe, I'm not sure if it's JB or if it's the commentators, they literally just say, "This is the midget match." It's like, oh boy.
I mean, it was known as midget wrestling for a long time. I think it's called micro wrestling now.
Micro wrestling, okay.
Micro wrestling, yeah. So at that time, it was just what it was called. So
yeah,
it makes sense.
So.
Yeah,
it does. So actually, the line in this match. So first of all, Tio, Hollywood, obviously they're little people.
Yeah,
they're branding them as extreme midgets. They have a pretty quick match here. It's not terrible. The first spot they try to do, one of them tries to do like a flying head scissors and just completely botches it, just full on their ass. At one point, the commentary just so odd during this match. I believe it was Mike Tenay. He says that when Rey Mysterio started to wrestle in Mexico, they wanted Rey to wrestle as a midget because he was so short. And then someone asks, "Well, what happened to him?" And he says, "Well, he didn't. And he went on to become a big star." And I was like, seems kind of weird. It's kind of suggesting that the midgets can't become big stars. But no, quick match. I think this was just to add variety. Jarrett did say he wanted TNA to be a variety show. And I've always been quite a big fan of the micro wrestlers, having them on the shows. typically I do shows in Mexico or I've done shows in England where you have a micro wrestler on the show.
Yeah.
And typically they'll get like the best reaction of the night because it's a lot of what these guys do is super impressive. Here, I'm not sure if it's the finish of the match, but I think it was Tio does like a swanton bomb, but not off the second rope, off the top rope. And you think about that, the top rope is far higher than the top of his head. So
Right.
he's jumping like that would be like it's scary for me on the top rope, but for him it's like double almost. So it's pretty impressive what they do. In all honesty,
Yeah. I wonder, do people have a problem with micro wrestling? Think it's exploitative or something now? Do you reckon?
I don't
see a problem. I don't have a problem with it.
I don't think well, of course, like they should be able to wrestle and stuff.
Yeah,
I think it's
100%,
more the way that it's can be branded or whatnot. Of course, I think like I don't think we're supposed to use the word midget anymore and stuff like that. And I think it's one of those things where I don't know. I think maybe it's exploitive if it's kind of if it's presented where you're supposed to laugh at it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Whereas like in Mexico, it's not like that. Like the micro wrestlers are seen like
With some level
big
of
stars.
respect.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So rather than, but like here and the way WWF did it in 97, 98, they're doing the commentary and they're kind of constantly telling short jokes and kind of making fun of the micro wrestlers. So that I would say was kind of exploitive, if you know what I mean. But of course they should be able to wrestle and everything else.
But this is actually the first I've seen little people in wrestling like Hornswoggle. Like it's always been a thing, but I've never actually seen a match. Because he's always just involved.
I wrestled Hornswoggle before. Do you think Hornswoggle? Because they kind of were making fun of him. Was that exploitive?
Yeah,
or not?
he was a freaking leprechaun. Do you think?
his original name, Hornswoggle, when he was brought up to WWE TV, was Little Bastard. That was his name. I love Hornswoggle, but Hornswoggle would talk about it like he makes his career from being a little person, you know what I mean, or a micro wrestler. Or
Yeah, that's
else,
cool. Yeah,
you know, and he wants that. Like if there's limited amount of roles for him in Hollywood, for example, so the spots that are there, he wants like the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Oh man,
which to this day it seems kind of controversial, but he's like, no, like these are roles for people like me, and now you're trying to take them away from us. So
wouldn't you think that that is kind of an underrepresented group if ever there was one, and to 100%. Take it away from this is just obscene.
It's I don't know. We don't need to get into all that.
No, we probably don't want to get political, but yeah, that's like hang on a minute.
Yeah,
that's like.
I've wrestled quite a handful of micro wrestlers, and I always just really, really enjoy it. And I really try to get creative with the spots. And I wrestled Little Legs in the UK. I wrestled quite a few Micro Man in Mexico, just like taking head scissors from him and all this stuff. And really fun. And you do the cool spots with them because, dude, there's not been many times in my career where I'm bigger than my opponent. So for me to wrestle like a micro wrestler, it's like awesome for me. It must be like what the Big Show feels like, you know? So, but like I said, it's such an easy story to tell that, you know, small versus large, and the micro wrestlers always have the fanfare behind them. So I think for me, I actually really enjoy wrestling with micro wrestlers, and I feel like I actually think that's like more entertaining than watching two micro wrestlers face each other. I think it's cool to have like a taller person against a micro wrestler. I love that dynamic personally. I always find that very entertaining. But all in all, this match wasn't great.
It wasn't.
But at the same time, it wasn't offensive, and it was over in less than 3 minutes. So
there you go. Yeah, that's the most offensive thing you can get is a boring match that's long. We saw a lot last week.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, talking about exploitation.
Oh no.
Here we go. This is total nonstop something. Next up, we see Ed Ferrara and Dom West in the ring. And they mentioned that next week we're going to see a lingerie battle royal. and they decide to bring out all the ladies that are participating in the match. We see a host of women here. We see Francine, who we saw a few weeks ago on our ECW episode. We see Daphne. We see Alexis Lurie, Elektra, Taylor Vaughan, and quite a few more who I was honestly not too familiar with. And when I tried to do the research, I realized the reason I didn't know them is because they were literally just either models or strippers that they'd brought in to kind of fill up numbers.
Maybe they came in with Scott Hall.
Maybe. That makes sense now. One of the ladies here was, I don't know if you remember BB from the Attitude Era. She was like a nurse that was on TV for a few weeks. But anyway, they get all the girls in the ring, and then Francine proceeds to kind of call out Dom West, calls him pudgy and everything else. And then she decides to basically rag on the rest of the girls and says that she's the biggest star and the only one that deserves to be there. She's then cut off by Elektra, who questions Francine's name, the Queen of Extreme, and then claims that Francine was responsible for ECW going out of business, which I was kind of like, what? Didn't make any sense.
Single-handedly bankrupted the whole company, apparently. I don't know how she's got the rap for that, but
just completely, I don't know. This basically just leads into a big cat fight. Elektra's shirt gets ripped off, and then they do the whole, I think someone grabbed Ed Ferrara's terrible leather jacket and they covered up Elektra, and they basically announced, like, hey, we're going to have the Battle Royal next week, the Lingerie Battle Royal. I don't even want to ask how you win that match. I don't know if it's a typical Battle Royal where you're just in lingerie, or if it's like all the women in the ring where they're dressed and you've got to strip them down to the lingerie. I'm not sure. But yeah, Alexis Lurie. Do you know who that is?
Mickey James.
There we go. This was one of the first times sort of mainstream wrestling had seen Mickey James, which I think was pretty sort of interesting that she was on the first ever TNA show. This was, I mean, again, it was relatively quick, but it's just crazy to think like how far the wrestling world has come in the last just 20 years.
Time capsule.
Dude, I watched WrestleMania this year. 2-day event.
Yeah.
My favorite match by far, by a long shot, was Charlotte Flair versus Rhea Ripley. Awesome match. Phenomenal. I was like, wow, that was amazing. And now there's all these women stars that, well, they're big stars, whether it's like a Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks, I've got blank ones, and Charlotte Flair, Rhea Ripley, Bianca Belair, Jamie Hayter. There's a whole bunch of them. And here, literally just like, okay, we're having them come out, these women come out and just being in their lingerie, not even wrestling. It's kind of weird, this wrestling in this era, it seems, because WWE, they were guilty of it as well. We've covered HLA on the podcast.
Yeah.
But just, it's a wrestling show, but then at the same time, it's like also soft porn. It's very strange.
It is very strange. So I'm assuming this lingerie match is their competitor to the bra and panties match. I'm assuming, but yeah, the stipulation is unclear. I don't think people care about the stipulation on how you win or lose a lingerie match. I don't think anybody cares, or at least as much as how frustrated I got about the strategic outfits last week of the bra and panties match. No one cares about that stuff apart from me, apparently. I did find it funny how, for some reason, Francine just got very incensed about the idea that people, no, you're not going to see me in my lingerie. Well, if you want to see her in her lingerie, just go back 3 episodes to Heatwave 98, where she's just happily commentating in it. She didn't have a problem with it then.
Well, also here, she's wearing a very sort of, what's the word?
Scantily clad.
Scantily clad.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like almost as bad anyway. So I don't know why. I don't know what triggered her in that, but it's just nothing made sense. Yeah. So you said this was, going back to Mickey James, this was her first big.
First time we've seen Mickey James on pay-per-view for sure.
Okay. Yeah. What's her name? Because you said, "Do I know who someone was?" I didn't get the name of who she was, but I just noticed that I've got in my notes. Is that Mickey James? So I put two and two together.
Alexis Laree or
Okay.
Larray. Alexis Laree. I'm not sure. We'll have to ask her. But yeah, this is obviously before she went to the WWF or WWE and became Trish Stratus's stalker.
Mm-hmm.
But nice to see her here. Other than that, always great to see Daphne. But yeah, this segment could probably do without, which unfortunately kind of goes into the next thing. Go backstage. We see Goldilocks again. She's been busy tonight. And she interviews a guy holding like a cricket bat. Yeah. By the name of Mortimer Plumtree.
Mortimer.
Is it Mortimer or Mortimer?
It was Mortimer. Mortimer Plumtree.
I did. I made a spelling mistake on my notes. Okay. Mortimer Plumtree. Basically, he looks like a stereotypical kind of headmaster of a prep school. Mortimer mentions how he was tormented growing up and has somehow turned two men who bullied him as a child into his own personal servants. They're a tag team and they do whatever he tells them to do. They speak when he tells them to speak, plus they wear whatever he tells them to wear. And their names are Rod and Richard, aka the Johnsons, who are basically two very kind of bulky / muscly looking wrestlers dressed up in outfits that make them look like, Johnsons, basically. Yeah. Skin-coloured.
Just skin-coloured all-in-one spandex thing.
They're called the Johnsons. The names are Rod and Richard.
Dick, yeah.
There's Richard, Dick, short for Richard, which I never really understood. The gimmick here is there's supposed to be two penises? What is this? We thought the flying Elvises.
Oh, you got me. Exactly.
We thought the flying Elvises was out there and a little kind of too out there to get behind. The Johnsons? My Lord. Okay. So next up, we see the debut of the Johnsons with Mortimer Plumtree defeat Psychosis and James Storm in 4 minutes and 52 seconds. During this match, we do see an appearance from a lady named Alicia, who comes out onto the stage and is basically, I want to say, they're not sure why she's there, but they presume that she's scouting somewhat. Alicia, do you have any idea who this is?
Is that Ryan Shamrock?
It was Ryan Shamrock, yes. Okay. Yes, who also played the part of Ken Shamrock's sister in WWF for a while. I think she did something in WCW as well, I want to say. And I was talking about Ed Ferrara's lines during this, that they got the camera on Alicia, Ryan Shamrock, and Ed Ferrara just screams, "I'm just begging for the cameraman to go a little lower on her." I'm like, oh man, like this dude, like, good Lord.
And he gets worse. It gets
worse. So much worse. It's crazy how, again, a lot of things have changed in 20 years, and there's a lot of things in wrestling that have changed that I'm not happy about. And this kind of stuff, obviously I'm happy about it because it just like, it just seems like the show is, I don't know, who's it aimed at? Do you know what I mean? Like,
so I actually don't mind this kind of, I've said this many episodes ago. I think, obviously, I was going to say, I think of course.
I'm not offended by it. Yeah, I'm not offended by it. I just think it's like childish and just not so funny and just desperate.
That's the thing. Like, for me, it has to be funny or at least clever. And when it's not, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm not like offended by any of this stuff. I just think it's like dumb. You know what I mean? Like, I want to watch a wrestling show and they're just like, ugh, I don't know. But anyway, what did you think of the Johnsons, Sam?
Jeez Louise. I have to, when they came out, I did laugh out loud.
They look like the Ding Dongs, but that's
but just because it's so stupid. And there's no, again, none of this is clever. So they're just coming. So why are they coming out with the prep school, the preppy kid? Like, there's no kind of, there's nothing ties it all together. They need a Bret Hart or a AJ Styles, but for the creative side, they need someone to kind of tie it all in. There's just nothing clever. Again, we talked about Rocco last week with the Legion of Doom.
Yes.
And just how that seems like it was randomly assigned with like a generator, like push a random button and it will come up with like a thing. This seems like the same thing. Nothing's married, it all seems very segmented. It's just silly thing for the sake of silly thing with another silly thing.
Well, it does seem, obviously the Attitude Era, the whole concept of it was to kind of shock people and just have stuff that was completely out there and against the grain and whatnot. It feels they're clearly trying to do that throughout this whole TNA pay-per-view. Like, oh, let's do something shocking. Oh, let's have two wrestlers dressed up as big penises. Ha ha ha. Like, that will be shocking. It's like, yes, it will. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. In fact, it's just pretty bad.
Also, yes, but also I feel like even at, well, maybe not actually. I was going to say, even at WWF's worst during that Attitude Era, there was at least some sort of like why behind it. So like the headbanger, you know, that was just, I don't know. With this, it just seems too just too for the sake of it.
Yeah,
but actually, I'm going to go back of my words because like the hand. Mae Young's hand,
right?
Like that seems like this. That was like that's famous because it's so out there.
Yeah,
because it was so
why
unexplained and so why a hand. Yeah, like even to this day, it's like why a hand when everything but that's because everything else was, no matter how lame it was,
they tied it
explained. Up. Yes, it was tied up nicely. This just seems like everything is of the hand,
right? And well, to be fair to them, they do try to explain it in the sense that this Mortimer Plumtree's like, they wear what I tell them to wear. So, but I don't know. Was the story kind of like,
but why?
Why do they?
Yeah.
And maybe we're going to find that out in weeks to come, which I don't think we do.
Yeah.
But
and why Johnson's? Like,
well, he said that these guys used to bully him. So is it kind of like he's getting his revenge? Like, now you're going to be my wrestlers, but I'm going to dress you up as penises. I should also, I haven't even mentioned this tag team dressed as the Johnsons or playing the Johnsons they were known as the Shane Twins, and they were basically, the biggest run was in the WWE as Gemini. Did you ever see them?
The name rings a bell, but no.
Yeah,
no.
They were Gemini, which funny enough, when Gemini were in the WWE was like part of the few years that I just did not watch WWE whatsoever. So I don't think I've ever seen a Gemini match, but I remember hearing about them and seeing their action figures be peg warmers in the stores and everything else. So, but yeah, I mean, it was cool to see Psychosis, and I guess it's worth noting here, this is the first time I think we've seen on a mainstream or a pay-per-view James Storm, who obviously went on to become a big mainstay for TNA, future tag team champion, world champion, and everything else. And it's kind of fun to see James here looking young and everything else.
I'm not familiar with him at all. Never seen him, so
I feel like you'd be quite a big fan of James Storm.
Yeah,
yeah. Here he's still very green and young, but he goes on to become really a mainstay of TNA. So if we do some more TNA, I'm sure you'll be seeing a lot more of James Storm for sure. Yes. So we've just seen Lingerie Battle Royal, just seen two dicks wrestling. Now we go back to the dressing room once again to Goldilocks. She's working hard tonight. And she's seen with a couple of rednecks who are picking their noses, and basically they cut a promo where, sorry, I should say they're called the Dupps. Right. And they're a family of cousins. There's two guys and a girl. They're all cousins, but also the girl is also
both of their girlfriends.
Is dating both of the guys, and they're called the Dupps. They're picking their noses. They're supposed to be hillbillies. And what's actually funny is, did you recognize any of these people?
No.
So one of them, I forget which name. I think it was Stand Up or Bo Dupp. One of them is Trevor Murdoch. Do you know of him?
Trevor Murdoch.
He was in the WWF for quite a lot of years. He was tag team with
redneck
Manscaped.
trucker guy with the red side. But okay.
And more recently, he's been wrestling last quite a few years or so in the current NWA. But yeah, this is
okay.
Trevor Murdoch as a 21-year-old. But yeah, basically do this promo here. They got the blonde woman with them. They say they're all cousins, and they say they're all dating each other. Again, they're trying to be Jerry Springer. They're trying to be shocking. It's like, guys, you'd get so much more heat if this wasn't so on the nose. You say that they're cousins, but then they're holding hands. And we question, what? That's weird. They're cousins. Why are they holding hands? You don't tell people that they're in a relationship. That's just like, oh, I know it's phony and it's just silly and trying to be shocking for the sake of it. The heat there is supposed to be their cousins, but then they have this weird relationship. Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, you're not. And we talked about that. Was that the first episode or second? It was way back when. But a lot of times I feel like even if you're doing something really dumb like this, you still got to give the audience aren't stupid. Even if you're going to feed them a stupid angle or a stupid character, there's got to be something for them to. You don't have to spell everything out.
Right.
Not everyone's, not everyone's, yeah, you're right. Like make it slightly subtle. Give them something to figure out. But yeah, when they just spell it out for them, it makes no sense. But here's something I need spelling out for me because maybe I'm too dumb. They all have a pun name. Stand Up. I can't remember what the lady was called.
Fluff Dupp.
Fluff Dupp. What does Bo Dupp mean?
I was going to ask you the same thing.
Oh,
Bo Dupp?
Maybe this is too smart for us. Maybe we do need. We've just completely invalidated my previous point by being too dumb to figure out.
Dude,
Bowed up, bowed as in bow tie when you're bowed up. No, I don't know.
Bowed, maybe. I didn't even honestly until I just started reading their names. I didn't even realize they were puns. Because I just didn't care about this. This is just wrestle crap at its finest. Dude, you know what? I was thinking about the rating for this show before we came on the pod. And in my head, I'd given it actually a pretty good rating. And now we're just going through this. I'm like, oh man, there's just way more crap on this show, actually, thinking about it. Now I'm sitting here going through it. It's just like one thing after another. But yeah, the Dupps, it obviously, what I do appreciate is TNA, it's a new company, and they're trying to come up with a bunch of their own gimmicks and storylines.
Yes,
that I appreciate.
Yes.
They're not just like, oh, this is old WF guy being, a version of his WF character.
Totally. Yeah.
Or whatever it is. And they've got fresh talent and they're trying to come up with stuff. And that now, when independent wrestlers used to get signed to the WWE back in the day, I would always get excited to see what gimmick or character the WWE would give them. And I always thought that was interesting. Most fans would be like, oh, they're going to change them. They're going to lump them with something. They're going to give them a stupid name or give them a stupid character. And I always thought, no, that's fun. I want to see
what's next. Yeah.
Right. I remember when Fergal Devitt, Finn Balor.
Finn Balor, yeah, Prince Devitt.
When he signed, which was probably maybe 2015 or maybe earlier, 2014 or something. My memory's terrible. But even back then, it was still a case of when they used to get people, it seemed like they would give them characters before they kind of moved away from that. And I remember being with him before he went to WWE, and we were basically like conversing, like, oh, what sort of idea, like what sort of character do you think they're going to come up with you? And, we thought maybe is it the Irish in Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, or is it Snatch? One of the two. Or like, oh, maybe they'll give you a gimmick like Snatch, or like maybe they'll give you like a Snatch gimmick or whatever. And then it turns out they just ended up making him basically Fergal Devitt, and they kind of gave up. I mean, they changed his name, but they kind of gave up on creating characters for wrestlers. And I feel like AEW does that as well. They bring in a lot of wrestlers from the independents or even from WWE, and They're just the same as what they've been doing. So I personally like it when they try and come up with stuff. And I remember years ago, before I signed with Ring of Honor, I was talking to Lucha Underground for a bit, and I was really excited for them to like maybe come up with a gimmick for me to then try and portray and everything else. Seems a bit of a lost art in wrestling. But here, TNA, they're really trying to come up with characters, but we haven't got too many home runs here. That's for sure.
No. I mean, I totally agree. I really am a fan of, and I don't care if the company does it or the star themselves, but like constantly reinventing themselves. Chris Jericho's a really good example of someone who's able to do that very well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we just talked obviously about Bray Wyatt earlier. He could have been stuck with, I can't remember the name now, Husky Harris,
right? Yeah.
But then he or the company just kept trying until they got it right, and they got it right with one of the best, gimmicks, like super good. Like imagine if you just stuck with what you got. The only exception for me is Kane. I wish he was just the same guy, like forever,
Everyone says that, but Kane's argument is the original incarnation of Kane, there wasn't really too many places he could go.
Right.
Just being a monster that doesn't talk and you can't see his face, you can't see his facial expressions. He probably would have got stale after a while of doing that. And then once he was stale, maybe they couldn't really do much of him, and they probably would have ended up being like, oh, we've done as much as we can with him and got rid of him. But him constantly evolving and everything else probably ended up being the reason why he ended up having such a long career, because he kept reinventing himself. So even though the first version, I agree with you 100%. My favorite version is the original version, but he probably could not have done that for 20 years,
Yeah. And we do, like, we've always said we like a gimmick. And even if, I know we laugh at how, like, the WWF, why is their gimmick a job? Like, why do they need to also wrestle on the side sort of thing? But it's a lot of fun, especially like a very clear-cut character gimmick. So, yes, you're right. I'm glad that they're taking a chance and they're trying with these gimmicks, trying to invent something of their own. But yeah, every single one of these seemed to have been pretty much a dud. And it's just really funny thinking about it, how when the Flying Elvises came out,
that's the best it's going to get.
It's the best of the night.
Yeah, we've had Flying Elvises, dicks, and now these hillbillies that pick their nose and eat it and have relationships with their cousin.
I just looked, and when you're bowed up, it means you've reached the limit of your patience.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So,
I kind of thought like bowed up. I thought it meant like you bow up to someone, but
yeah.
So that promo from the Dupps, the Hillbillies, that's just the lead-in for essentially a get-over match, as the Dupps with Fluff Dupp, Bo Dupp and Stand Up defeat Christian York and Jerry Matthews in 3 minutes and 41 seconds. Now, this show, not only have we got these terrible gimmicks, but this show is almost the epitome of wrestling. This is so southernized. Southern, just through and through. And it really shows here, because we go back to the ring, we see Bullrash, JB, and he introduces the NASCAR Winston Cup points leader, Sterling Marlin. And Marling is accompanied by, is it Hernley Sadler? Hermie or Hernley? Herney?
Mate,
I know nothing about NASCAR. I guess Hermie Sadler. Hermie Sadler.
Hermie Sadler, yeah.
Hermie Sadler was the 1993 Busch Series Rookie of the Year. Okay. I know nothing about NASCAR. We're from the UK. NASCAR is not a thing. I appreciate that it's very, very popular in the States. I obviously had no idea who these guys were, but the audience in Alabama, Huntsville, absolutely did. They got like a massive pop for these two NASCAR drivers. And of course, they wouldn't be there to not do an angle. So They
Right.
start talking, and out comes Ron the Truth Killings, otherwise known as R-Truth, or otherwise known as K-Quick,
K-Quick.
or here he's known as K-Crush. Now, so K-Crush here, Ron the Truth Killings, he mentions how he's sick of people talking about race car drivers being real athletes, and says that he's a pro wrestler. He's a real athlete. Then he basically goes into this kind of weird promo where he talks about my kind versus your kind. And I think the way they're trying to do it is where he's trying to insinuate that he's talking about pro wrestlers and NASCAR drivers, but it comes across as
That's like an allegory for race.
well, it's about race. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think R-Truth's gimmick at the time was kind of built around race and everything else, which of course kind of fits into this kind of risque type show that TNA are producing here. What's really funny here is I think R-Truth looks like a freaking badass here. He's like jacked and ripped. He's got the cool dreadlocks. I think he's got like a nose ring, and he looks like a badass. He looks like he would mess you up as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the race car drivers basically rip on R-Truth for like his clothes that he's wearing, being like, you look like a disgrace or whatnot. And the NASCAR drivers look way worse than R-Truth. They're wearing like dad jeans and just
the dad jeans, like with the polo shirt, just like baggily tucked in. Yeah.
I was like, how dare you rag on R-Truth for his dress sense when you look like that? But basically, I think at one point R-Truth goes to get physical with the NASCAR drivers, and then it's broken up by Brian Lawler, aka Brian Christopher, aka Grandmaster Sexay, who attacks Killings before R-Truth gets thrown up the ring by the NASCAR drivers to a huge pop. The segment ends with Lawler or Christopher challenging Killings to a match next week with the NASCAR drivers at ringside.
It sounds ludicrous, and it sucked, and it sounds like it sucked, and it did. But the crowd did love this.
The crowd did.
They friggin' loved it.
What is worrying is the Southern Stars. Like in a minute, we're going to see a country singing star, another thing
Oh, God.
you and I know nothing really about. But the country singer and the NASCAR drivers, I'm pretty sure got bigger pops than any of the wrestlers on the show. Clearly, when you're running these shows, they're doing pay-per-view, wrestling loves to get celebrities because I guess in their heads, it kind of gives the wrestling a credibility.
Yeah,
They're trying to make it more mainstream. They're trying to get publicity, you know, and the idea of clearly, I don't know who these NASCAR drivers are, but clearly they're pretty well known, pretty famous. So if they're involved in a wrestling ring, they're getting a shoving match with a wrestler, that's probably going to be covered in at least the newspapers or the internet back then, whatever it is. And they're all just trying to get press for TNA. And there's quite a few celebrities on this show. So from the get-go, TNA is trying hard to get that publicity. They're trying to get their name out there. They're trying to show and distinct themselves from being just like another wrestling company or being an indie, whatever it is. What I think is the story of this is, so R-Truth, he'd been in the WWF before this as K-Quick.
Yeah.
And his run in the WWF was, at that point, was super short, and it was quite underwhelming. He was just a tag team partner of the Road Dogg.
Road Dogg.
I don't know what happened. I don't know how he ended up leaving the WWE. Maybe I should look at that. But he never really came across as a big star back then. TNA got hold of him here, and they gave R-Truth the chance to perform and have a character and cut promos. And he really shines here in TNA. He actually ends up becoming NWA TNA champion not too long after this. Yeah. I think they said he was maybe the first African-American NWA champion, possibly. But basically, his work here in TNA ends up being really, really solid, where he ends up getting a second run with the WWE to the point where I think he's still employed there now. So Everyone loves R-Truth. Vince McMahon loves R-Truth. And here I was watching him and he's doing all these different facials. And I was thinking, wow, like he really is a level up from like the rest of the talent that we've seen on the show so far. I mean, Albert, the talent we've seen has been the Johnsons and the Dupps, but just to clear from them to R-Truth, just a big, big difference.
For sure, yeah.
Another funny thing, they treat Grandmaster Sexay here almost like a top guy, almost like a main eventer. And of course, in the WWE, he was kind of mid-card at best, if not lower than that. Of course, he's Jerry Lawler's son, and Jerry Lawler big in Memphis with the Jarretts. Brian Christopher's big in Memphis, so again, would have wrestled a lot and feuded with the Jarretts. So here they kind of present him more like a main eventer, which I don't know if you're a WWF fan. So, in fact, I'll tie Jarrett into this. So Jeff Jarrett was in the WWF for years, and he was always kind of a mid-card guy, or at least, Intercontinental Champion type guy.
Yeah.
But before he left the company, he was losing to China. And then I remember seeing him win, not long after that, the WCW World title. And me kind of thinking, man, WCW must suck if Jeff Jarrett is the champion.
Right.
Because I'd already viewed him as a mid-carder. So I kind of feel like that here with TNA, they've got Grandmaster Sexay, but they're kind of treating him. And the thing is, Too Cool were an overact. They were, and like you could argue at the peak of the WWF,
sure.
like they were definitely a big overact.
It was their shenanigans that did it.
Right. But like they were never seen as like, they weren't on the same level as Stone Cold and The Rock, or at least presented in that, in terms of on the card, you know, they weren't fighting for the World Heavyweight Championship. So to see him here kind of presented as a top guy, I feel like if you're a fan watching for the first time, which it would have been, it's the first show, there's a slight disconnect there, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And is this fair to say that even in Too Cool, Grandmaster Sexay was like the other one? It was Scotty 2 Hotty that was doing getting all of the crowd with.
You're saying, the Grandmaster Sexay was the Marty Jannetty of the team.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you could say that Scotty was the star of the team.
Yeah,
the Worm was
Rikishi,
the most
but yeah.
Rikishi, but it's a tag team. I'd say Scotty.
It was Scotty, yeah.
And we could argue that Scotty's thing was just as over as Rikishi's deal as well. They were pretty super over at one point, but yeah.
My mum used to thought that they were just like the funniest thing in the world when they put on his glasses and Rikishi started dancing. She used to just crack up, like her head tipped back. Just thought it was the funniest thing that's ever been put to TV.
I have a funny story. So when the internet first came about, I don't think we had it at my home, but they had it in the local library. So I used to go to the library. It sounds funny now. I'm sure younger people listening to this can't understand this whatsoever, but I used to walk from my house to the library just to go sit on the computer and browse the internet, you know? And this is before I knew how to download music or anything like that. On the WWF website, you could play these different games, and then when you won the game, depending on whatever the game's theme was, let's say it was like The Rock's game or Stone Cold's game or Too Cool's game, it would play their music when you won the game. So I used to sit there and play the game so I could listen to the music, right? Sounds like a long way to go around,
and if you didn't complete the game, then you didn't get to listen to your music for the day.
So there was a Too Cool one, and I think the game was like some kind of puzzle where you had to move pictures into place. But the Too Cool one, the backdrop in which the puzzle pieces were to the side of, which you had to put on, the backdrop was just a big picture of Rikishi's ass, right?
Really?
And I'm like 11 years old. And I remember being on the computer.
In the library.
Big screen of Rikishi's ass. And of course, the librarian comes around and tells me off, says this library's not for that, and like kicks me out. And she didn't realize it was a man's ass. I don't think it would have made much of a difference, but I was like so embarrassed by that. I think she thought I was putting up porn on the libraries, public library computer. But I was like, no, I just want to listen to Too Cool's music.
Oh man, that's hilarious. I like the idea that there's a listener who you've mentioned that story and that they've just like suddenly remembered that puzzle that they used to play as well.
Maybe, I'm sure
that'd be cool if you remember these games. I
Yeah.
remember Mankind had like his own little boiler room part of the site of the old WWF website, but I don't remember the games.
Well, actually, I said they were on WWE.com, but actually, I think they were on their own specific websites. It's when they used to have like TheRock.com or StoneColdSteveAustin.com or TooCool.com. I'm pretty sure that was the case. So, yes, but moving on from my traumatizing library experience.
Of all the butts that you can get caught looking at and thrown out of a library,
anytime I was watching wrestling as a youngster, anytime like my father would come past the TV screen or my mother or friends would come over, it'd always be the moments where it's like, oh, damn, like Kai cutting off Val Venus's dick and just whatever it was. It was always like embarrassing like that. Or Rikishi doing the stink face. You're like, oh, this is kind of embarrassing.
I remember I used to pull a sickie and I used to go around my grandma's house for the day. And I used to bring my WrestleMania 2000 tape.
Yes.
And I just used to she used to make me microchips. This isn't micro wrestling.
Oh.
This is McCain's microchips. Which
I forgot about microchips, so you just said
that you can put in the... That's what I want us to do with someone who... About that puzzle, what I just did to you with microchips. And they were chips that could go in the microwave, or fries, sorry, not those type of chips, like French fries. They can go in the microwave and they don't come out soggy. They were nice and crisp. And I just used to eat microchips and watch my WrestleMania 2000 tape. And I remember when my mum came and picked me up and asked her mum, like, how is he? My grandma just said, I can't believe he's watching this thing. It's all sex related and I just could not understand what she got from that. And it was TNA, going back to Test and Albert. It's because of Trish Stratus. It's called TNA. My grandma was like, how can he watch this stuff? But it was just like the whole thing was way over my head. So I was too oblivious when anything odd came on my screen. I was just way too oblivious.
So like Val Venus finishing move was the money shot.
The money shot, yeah.
I did not get that as a kid.
No,
that went over my head.
Did it? Careful.
Oh god.
Lucky dodge.
Oh dear. I also had. I was a massive fan of DX, and I had the DX jersey, which on the back had the number 6. Well, I had 69 on the back of the jersey.
Yeah.
And my mother's partner at the time wasn't too happy about that. And he's like, and I remember him saying, my mum just being like, oh, what's the problem? And him being like, he doesn't know what it means. And I was like, yeah, you're right, I don't, But I remember going to school a few times in the UK, we have to actually wear uniform to school. So every now and then, maybe once a year, they would do a non-uniform day. I think you had to pay to donate to a charity, maybe like £1, whatever it was, and you could wear not your uniform.
Yeah.
And I remember wearing DX tops, and one of them just says 2 words for you, suck it. And both times I got told could not wear that and had to change into something else. So yeah, in fact, the whole Attitude Era got me into a lot of trouble at school, but that's for another day and another podcast. We should probably get moving on with this.
I will say, I remember I was on holiday and my dad, and it was sunny, and I was just like play fighting with my dad. I was begging him to give me a pimp drop, and he got really
I thought you were going to say you were begging for him to give you a stink face. Oh jeez.
But then he had to tell me what a pimp was. Like he was like, I was like, what?
Well, I did again when I first saw Godfather as a kid. I didn't realize he was a pimp. I thought
he was like a party guy.
Yeah, I thought like, oh, ladies just really like him.
Yeah.
And when he was talking about hoes, I just thought that was like a name for woman. I didn't really realize.
Like a term of endearment.
Yeah. Like, oh, his ladies, he calls them the hoes. Okay, cool.
Oh, isn't that cute? Yeah.
Yeah.
He's even got a pet name for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on with this show and moving on with the Southern wrestling theme. It's time for a musical segment involving the legendary country star CMA Male Vocalist of the Year, Toby Keith, who apparently is actually really big star. Have you heard of Toby Keith before?
Nope.
I actually have.
Have you?
Probably just through wrestling, but I've heard of Toby Keith. But he's here to sing the song The Angry American. Whilst playing on his guitar and singing on the entrance ramp, he's about to get to, he says some line, I didn't quite catch it, but something about America. Obviously, this was like a year after 9/11, not long after that, and he says some kind of patriotic line about America, and Jeff Jarrett storms out and he shoves Toby Keith and the microphone aside. And so I actually think this was quite an iconic moment for early TNA because, like I said, Toby Keith, big deal. Toby Keith looks really, really annoyed. He really wants a piece of Jarrett, but he's restrained by security who escort him to the back, and it's now time for the main event. I'm not a fan whatsoever of country music, but I actually didn't mind this song. I thought, oh, it's quite nice. It's like, maybe I should try and give country music a chance. I don't know. What did you think?
Oh, I couldn't stand it. I hate country music. But it's so popular in America.
So popular.
So popular.
Is country music popular anywhere else in the world?
Well,
other than North America?
I don't know. I don't think so. People have to tell us. I'd be shocked if it was.
Well, it's funny, isn't it, how there's some things that are just so popular in America that don't really seem to be things anywhere else. Like, I guess I might be wrong, but American football, that's pretty much isolated to America, right?
Yeah, while the rest of the world plays actual football.
Well, they play football, or we have rugby, which is similar.
Rugby is similar,
but but American football is the number one sport here. I don't understand that, how America is so, it has such an influence over the world, but then it has these things that are just
that's so closed off internationally.
Right.
Yeah,
and they distribute so much. The music from America is all over the world, and the TV shows and Hollywood and everything else is just such a big part of the world's culture. But then American football just completely isolated.
They have these things that are just so fiercely American only, like
American
country music
and country music. Yeah, just so American. I mean, there's probably countries where country music is massive and we're just completely being ignorant assholes here. To apologize, but yeah.
Oh yeah, let us know. I'd be interested.
I could never get into country music, and I could never get into American football. And NASCAR, I think, might be another one as well. Just, I don't know. We're just so
I've got into something that I consider very American only, but it's actually a thing in Canada as well. I had something very American for dinner this week, didn't I?
Was it corn dogs?
No, I had, what are they called? Rocky Mountain oysters, or prairie oysters if you're from Canada, which is bull testicles.
Ooh, is that American?
Yeah, but also Canadian as well.
How were they?
Yeah. Okay, so when they arrived, they had really thick, squidgy, bright red veins all over them.
Okay.
And I'm glad that I looked, but I found out that I'm supposed to cut into the membrane and rip that skin off. And when I ripped the skin off the old beanbag, and the veins were peeling off as well, I felt lightheaded in my own balls. Does that make sense? Like an empathy thing. I thought I was going to faint. But I deep fried them.
This sounds so disgusting.
And no, I promise you, man, they're so good.
What?
Yeah.
But that's not fair. You deep fry
everything's
them.
deep fried is good. Yeah, fair enough. I'm gonna make them for you one day.
Thank you. Wow.
And honestly, I was pleasantly surprised. If you have nothing to do with the preparation stage, and my friend said to me, "Oh, you're supposed to slice them thinner," or what you could do is, I'm gonna feel funny again just saying this. She said, flatten them out. With a rolling pin, smash, thin, and smashing out, and just the thought of smashing a testicle until it's thin, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do it. I couldn't attack it. So that's my attempt at. I can't do the country music, but I'll eat the Rocky Mountain oysters.
Has watching this episode of TNA just like turned you stir
Fried
crazy?
I think it did. No, hang on a minute. This was the same night. Yeah, no, I watched the second. I didn't even think about that. I paused it. I watched the second. I made the Rocky Mountain oysters, and then I carried. Oh my god, yeah, and then I watched the second half.
Were you influenced by the Johnsons?
Oh no, yeah, I guess I was.
You had Dick and Balls on the mind.
I think I did. Oh my god. Oh no.
Well, it's now time for tonight's main event. Of course, it is the gauntlet for the gold to crown the first ever NWA TNA World Champion. Essentially a Royal Rumble, but the final two, it turns into a match, which will be refereed by Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Did I mention that earlier? Did we miss that part? Okay. Well, Ricky Steamboat will be out there as well. So, as Jackie Fargo said earlier, number one entrant is Jeff Jarrett. He's followed by entrant number 2, Buff Bagwell. Now,
which was nice. I didn't know that was going to happen.
Neither did I. And you know what? This match may have been, I don't want to jump the gun, but it might have been my favorite on the show, or at least maybe not favorite match, but most entertaining, because I just wasn't sure who was going to come out next. I was like, oh, cool. So Buff Bagwell, we spoke about him a few weeks ago in our Invasion episode.
Mm-hmm.
They tried him out in the WWF for the Invasion angle. It didn't work out. So here he is here in TNA. I don't remember him doing too much in TNA. I think he was only there for like the first few months or so. But I thought it was great to see Buff. He got a great reaction from the crowd. Yeah. And then Jarrett.
Then they wasted him.
He was like 60 seconds in the ring. Jarrett just eliminated him.
Yeah.
So bizarre.
And they did this a couple of times with Jeff Jarrett at the start, where half of the runtime of the match, up until the point where other people came in, we're just waiting for the last 30 seconds of the time to go down. And there's just Jeff Jarrett standing by himself. What a waste. You had Buff Bagwell. You could have had another 30 seconds of action.
Well, I have a theory on a bunch of this stuff that I want to get into, but I think this real quick before we get into the Battle Royal. TNA, especially in the early days, was often given criticism for having so much focus on Jeff Jarrett.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing. So Jeff Jarrett, he was the promoter and the owner of the company, right?
Yeah.
Who can he depend on more than anyone else but himself, right? Jeff Jarrett, he was a recognizable name. You know, he'd been a world champion in WCW. He'd been in the WWF for years. He was a great worker. He could cut promos and talk. And again, he was the promoter. He didn't have to worry about him leaving to go to the WWF or WWE. He didn't have to worry about him being, being held up for more money or whatever it might be. He didn't have to worry about all these things. It's like you're running a weekly TV show. You need guys you can depend on.
That dependability, yeah.
Right. And I'm sure at this point, they probably weren't even giving out like full-time contracts either. So just, how can they write TV? Like, how can you write TV with a guy unless you have him contracted to do at least, 3 months of TV or whatever it may be. So the fact that he used himself a lot in the main storylines, it completely makes sense. It really does. And that happened in a lot of the territories back in the day. So I see people's points and they want to see other guys get the spotlight, but speaking from the other side, I completely understand why Jeff was so heavily featured. But this Battle Royal, I don't want to go into each and every elimination, whatnot, but basically I'll just go through a list of some of the guys. So of course we have Ken Shamrock, Malice, Brian Christopher, Bruce, who was Keyway in WCW, Buff Bagwell, Chris Harris, Del Rios, Devon Storm, otherwise known as Crowbar, Grant Apollo, Devon Storm, otherwise known as Crowbar in WCW, Grant Apollo, Jeff Jarrett, Justice, K-Crush, Conan, Lash LaRue, Norman Smiley, Rick Steiner, Scott Hall, / Steve Carino, the Vampire Warrior, also known as Gangrel. Now, it's going through my notes. I've got Buff Bagwell eliminated straight away. That seems a shame. I think the next entrant is Lash LaRue, who did feature on our WCW Thunder episode.
He ran in, right? He intervened or something?
He was part of the Rumble here, but he just got the complete crap kicked out of him by Jarrett and thrown out straight away.
Yeah.
Lash
No, I
LaRue,
mean, he intervened in the Thunder episode. He ran
Oh,
in,
yes.
Yeah. But yeah, here he was another one, straight out. Another 30 seconds of watching Jeff Jarrett.
Yeah. I did notice during this, it seemed like every wrestler, the commentators would say, oh, they're a former WCW wrestler. Obviously, I just listed off the names. So throughout the show, we've had to deal with Flying Elvises, the Johnsons, the Hillbillies, everything else. And it seemed like in this Battle Royal, there is like a bunch of star power and names.
Yeah.
And I felt like a lot of it seemed to almost like a waste. Like I felt like if I was booking and I had Scott Hall booked for my show,
Bagwell and
I'm having Scott Hall work a singles match. You know what I mean?
Right.
Not only this, but this is a Battle Royal. There's 20 guys in there. Only one can win. So that's 19 guys having to do the job. 19 guys not winning. If I'm running the show, I've got someone like a Scott Hall or a Conan. Or a bunch of these guys. I want to highlight them on my TV show and have them win on the first week, you know? So I get what they were trying to do here. They wanted to highlight other talent, so it didn't look like they were going to be just a WCW ripoff. But I feel like they're going to sprinkle this star power throughout the show. I think they really want this to be a star-studded Battle Royal, which I completely understand. But we have to sit through an hour and a half to get here. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. Like I said, I just listed off a whole bunch of names, and it definitely had some star power. Just to me, it's a shame that it wasn't spread out throughout the show. But yeah, they keep saying, "Oh, this guy's a former WWF. This guy's former WCW." Another really random thing in this match. So, a wrestler named Del Rios, not Del Rio, Del Rios, makes his way to the ring. And when he first comes out, the crowd pop huge because they think that he's Scott Steiner. And the reason this is so weird.
I've never seen...
For some reason, Del Rios, he was the Magic Man in the WWF for like one show. The guy that did Magic, what was his name again? Fantasia, I think it was. Something like that. But here, Del Rios, he's basically a complete Scott Steiner ripoff. Big jacked guy, the Superman trunks, the bleached blonde hair with the goatee.
With the black strip, yeah.
And
I think he had the Superman logo, right?
He did.
Well. Yeah.
He's just dressed like Scott Steiner. The crowd pop because they think it's Scott Steiner, and then they realize it's not. It's like a cheap imitation. And what gets really weird about this is later in the match, Rick Steiner comes in and like,
yes,
what is he thinking this? Like, so I tried to do some research on this and could never seem to get an answer. Like, I assume this was some kind of rib from Jeff Jarrett and Jerry Jarrett, Jeff's father, where they had someone impersonate Scott Steiner. And to them, maybe it was funny, but I think as a fan watching, you're watching it thinking, this is kind of like lame, and it's just like the cheap version of wrestling when they have a Scott Steiner ripoff.
like the tribute.
Yeah. Come back. I will say this. I'm not just saying this because he's, my boy, but Conan comes out and gets humongous pop.
Yeah.
Such a big pop. And it got me thinking. So obviously Conan was a massive star in Mexico. He was like one of the biggest stars to ever come out of Mexico and sold out arenas and everything else. But the pop he got here, and it got me thinking about how over he was in WCW. And it almost seems a shame that he never had like a super main event run sort of in North America for one of the mainstream companies. I mean, he never, as Conan, never got a run in the WWF. And I think,
Mm-mm.
dude, Conan in the Attitude Era would have fit
Would have been
perfectly
great.
in the
Yeah,
WWF.
yeah.
But even here in like 2002, he could have been a big star for the WWF. And it's such a shame, I think, that he didn't get a run there. And his run in WCW was successful, but I think a run as a main eventer, I think he could have done great because he was over with the audience. And here, like I said, the crowd goes nuts for him.
Yeah, he did.
Other things to note, Scott Hall is in there working his ass off. The commentators tell a little lie. They say that Scott Hall left the WWF recently via mutual agreement. Don't think that was the case. I think Scott Hall's demons crept in and they had to get rid of Scott Hall, unfortunately, which sucked because I was so excited for the NWO to come back and join the WWF. But this Battle Royal, they keep it pretty entertaining. It's like I said, the entrance coming in, me not knowing who was going to come out next, I found kind of fascinating. What say you, Sam?
Well, I think that would apply to any Battle Royale or Royal Rumble thing. It wasn't necessarily the match itself.
Yeah, but most Royal Rumbles, you kind of know who's coming in. This, I have no
guess
idea.
Because it's the first, it could literally be anything. Yeah, I understand. Okay, that makes more sense.
I could tell. Like, typically, you watch the WWF Royal Rumble, and you know it's their roster plus maybe a surprise or two. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Here, I had no idea because I was like, I didn't even know. I can't even remember who was in TNA at the start. You know?
Right. Yeah. Fair enough. That doesn't, and that is important. But on the other hand, that doesn't really speak to the quality of the match at all. It's not. It's a completely separate thing. I wasn't a huge fan of this. I didn't really know who many of the people were. I do find it funny how Gangrel has to, when you've done that to your teeth, you have, what other gimmick can you have? So they just have to do another vampire. It's like, what can you do?
I'm gonna break your heart here. I'm pretty sure Dave can pull the. Oh, can he? I feel like he can pull them out. I should know.
I saw he had, like, implants or something.
I think he pulls them in and out. I saw Dave Heath, Big Dave. I called him Gangrel. I saw him like a week ago actually at convention, and it's funny because when I first started wrestling, obviously back in England, Gangrel used to wrestle a lot.
Yeah.
He would come to England sometimes for maybe 6 months and just tour and wrestle the whole time. And I remember wrestling Gangrel when I was really young and really marking out for it and being in the ring as his awesome entrance music played. And so it kind of became quite pally with Dave or Gangrel. And when I was booking for Ring of Honor and we had a Battle Royal, every Battle Royal, in my opinion, or Royal Rumble has to have some good cameos. Because otherwise, like you said, Battle Royals, kind of boring. It's all about pretty much who's coming in and what interactions you can make. But it always helps to have some good cameos. So I booked Gangrel for the Battle Royal. And just the idea of, I don't know, it was just kind of cool. Like me being super young, like 18, wrestling Gangrel. And then years later, I book him for a Ring of Honor show. I just thought it was really cool. And of course, when he came out, he got a huge pop. Like people still, it's funny, that Gangrel run was a year and a half in the WWF, and people still remember it to this day so well. Like that Attitude Era was so big. It's like, damn, if you're a wrestler in that era, like you could probably make money for the rest of your life. Do you know what I mean? The rest of your career based off being in that time period. So
yeah.
But he's called the Vampire
Warrior.
Right. Which, I don't know, like, I always felt, obviously they could use Gangrel. There was some trademark. I think even the WWF had problems with the Gangrel.
They licensed it. It was from a comic, I believe.
Yeah, they licensed it from Marvel.
I remember the games that he was in also used to say copyright, like White Wolf Comics.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that rings a bell. I feel like when a wrestler goes to another company, if they change the name, but they have the same gimmick, I always feel like it comes across as like a cheap imitation.
I do, yeah.
You do as well? Mm-hmm. I feel like
if
if they've got to change the name, I feel like they've got to change the gimmick.
Well, we talked just earlier about people how good constantly reinventing yourself is and how important that is. By and large, there's exceptions.
Right.
So that would just be another one. Yeah, no,
But,
I
like,
completely agree. It
Gangrel
seems like you're
was-
trying to.
I mean, Gangrel was always going to be, like you said, Gangrel or vampire, but maybe they could have like updated it somewhat here, you know?
Yeah, I think they could have. If you when you speak to him, don't ask about, or don't if you find out, don't tell me, right? Just let me live my life, and I don't in my ignorance. Okay, to me, he got them done.
Am I breaking kayfabe if I tell you that he's not a real vampire?
That I'm okay with, because obviously we also know that he was, what was it? He licensed the name, or WWF licensed the name. Let me just believe that he actually did that to his teeth because he believed in the gimmick so much. And let me move on.
Don't you think this is funny that he's this big, ginormous vampire, but he's actually just a guy called Dave?
Dave.
All right, Dave. All right, Dave. You're going to put your fangs in.
Put your fangs in, Dave. Yeah. Oh, dearie me. Can you explain? You mentioned the copycat Scott Steiner.
Yes.
Ripoff. Gay, weak Hulk Hogan.
Oh,
what was going on there?
There was Bruce who came out with Lenny Lane. So Bruce is actually Kiwi from WCW. Lenny Lane was also from WCW. Lenny and Lodi were a team. Lenny and Lodi, and they did like how do I explain this? Trying to think of the right way to say it. Basically, they did like a homosexual type tag team gimmick. I think Lodi was injured here, so they had Kiwi, and they made him Bruce. Apparently, Bruce was a rib over Bruce Pritchard. I guess a lot of this stuff is these gimmicks are done through ribs, and they called Bruce and Lenny Lane here the
Rainbow Express.
The Rainbow Express. So it's just like, okay, and dude, they come out, Bruce and Lenny Lane, they're arm in arm, like linked arms, and the commentary, I can't remember who it was. It might have even been Don West, I'm not sure. But someone literally screams, "You've got to be kidding me. They are coming out holding arms." Like, they thought that was just, their mind was blown.
Outrage,
that two men were holding arms. Again,
So,
it's just the gimmicks. The gimmicks they decided to give to people just, they're swinging and missing by miles.
Missing by miles. What was the rib on Hulk Hogan?
Was he supposed to be like Hulk?
Well, he had Hulk Hogan's haircut.
I think that's just what the hair he had.
Oh, was it really? Okay.
I think so. I think so.
Oh man, that's funny. Conan was awesome, star of the match. He's the only one I know. There was a big guy who I don't remember his name, but because I don't know TNA. The big guy with the long hair was Abyss later on, right?
Oh, so Chris Justice was in there. I was going to ask you that actually. Yeah. So Abyss is in the Battle Royal, but before
Abyss
he was Abyss.
And Abyss is, Mum, can we get Kane? We've got Kane at home, right?
I don't
TNA
think
Kane.
I think it would be like, I think back then I used to think it's kind of a cross between Kane and Mankind because he did like the hardcore stuff.
I suppose. And his
mask is kind of similar.
More like, okay, fair.
Chris or Abyss, though, hell of a worker. I would argue a better worker than Kane. Like he was phenomenal. Such a good athlete. Really never got his flowers in wrestling. And it was probably because he spent his whole career in TNA. He is in the WWE now. He's been in the WWE for quite a few years as a producer, like an agent, but never as a wrestler. But Abyss, I always thought one of the most underrated talents. Such a great big man, and apparently he did kind of during his TNA run get an offer from the WWE to go there and maybe work with The Undertaker and everything else. And Abyss turned it down, apparently, and he wanted to stay loyal to TNA.
Good.
And it kind of seems like it's a shame. Like I would have loved to have seen him have that big run because I thought he was awesome. I've had the chance to wrestle Abyss only once or twice, maybe, but super great guy, awesome wrestler. And yeah, here watching him come out just in a singlet and no mask, he doesn't look great, but I think he did this show. One of the bookers at the time of TNA were helping out Jarrett with his first show was Dutch Mantel. Dutch Mantel was the booker in Puerto Rico. So saw Chris Justice, whatever he was called here, or Prince Justice, I think it was called, realized he had potential and took him to Puerto Rico, and they came up with that Abyss gimmick, which ultimately ended up coming back to the States with and back to TNA with, and obviously really worked out for him. So yeah, kind of interesting snippet to see Abyss here. Norman Smiley as well. Kind of interesting to see him here.
The guy who looks like he came out of a time machine from
He does.
40 years ago. Yeah.
Doing the big wiggle. I was always a big fan of Norman Smiley. Another sort of former WCW guy. Interesting to see Steve Carino here. Have you ever seen Steve Carino? You do know who that is?
Nope.
Okay. He was an ECW world champion. After this, spent a lot of time in Japan and whatnot. But interestingly, a main eventer in ECW, but then after that, never really got a chance in the WWF or before that WCW. So interesting to see. But basically, the final two, it comes down to.
Before the final two, Toby Keith comes back.
Oh, he does?
And he suplexes Jeff Jarrett.
Not just a suplex, a stalling suplex.
A stalling suplex on Jeff Jarrett, which is kind of, if he's a coach, that's kind of cool that he went to that level. But
yeah, well, I think the idea so Toby Keith's a big star. Jarrett wanted as much press as possible. It's kind of like, if he gets me up for a stalling suplex, that's plenty of time for pictures to be taken of him lifting him above his head, So, I guess they're obviously trying to, and of course, it's weird because it's pay-per-view, but they're kind of doing it in like a TV format. And it's got to be episodic kind of TV for people to want to pay for it again next week. So they're obviously building this thing with Toby Keith and Jeff Jarrett to say people be like, oh, what's going to happen? And they pay for the pay-per-view next week. But it finally comes down to Ken Shamrock versus Malice. Do you know who Malice is, Sam?
I do not know who Malice is.
Okay, so Malice has been on the show before.
Oh.
Okay, I'll help you out. He was on the WCW Thunder episode that
we
did.
Oh no, that doesn't help. Oh God.
On that WCW Thunder show, he may have been tabled.
Now you're saying the right keywords. Was he really? Okay. Yeah.
You're supposed to give me. No, who is it?
I don't know. What's his name? You tell me his name. Tell me his name.
He was the Wall in WCW.
The Wall. That was his name.
Sting
yes,
in the tables match.
Berlin and yes, I remember that. The Wall. Yeah. Where he no-sold the table in their first table match.
There we go. But you see him here. This is only a few years after that Thunder episode. He looks completely different here.
It's a lot leaner. Yeah.
He's lost a lot of weight. He's covered in tattoos. He's grown his hair out, maybe dyed it. He looks pretty impressive here. So interesting to have him. Interesting choice in the final two with Ken Shamrock. Clearly, they had sort of big plans with Malice to be a title contender. I'm not really sure if that ever worked out, but Ken Shamrock here. They have the match. Ricky Steamboat is the special guest referee. They have, I think, actually a pretty fun back and forth.
Yeah.
The one bit I thought was cool was Ken Shamrock got Malice in the ankle lock, and Malice is reaching for the ropes, and his manager, I should also mention, the Sinister Minister, Father James Mitchell, pushes the rope towards Malice, and this never normally really works, but it actually works. This time Malice gets the rope because James Mitchell, his manager, was pushing the rope towards him. So they have a pretty fun back and forth.
Yeah.
There was another spot where Malice went to chokeslam Shamrock, and as he had him up there, Shamrock turned it into a cross arm breaker. And Shamrock pretty much just landed straight on his head.
Yeah, it looked like almost like it got power bombed or something.
Yeah,
Just
we
crap,
basically got
yeah.
choke slammed, but kept hold of the cross arm breaker. But they have a pretty fun back and forth match. But ultimately, they go with Ken Shamrock as the first ever NWA TNA champion. Sam, seeing the rest of the talent on this show, do you think they made the right choice of going with Ken Shamrock as the first TNA champion?
You know my thoughts about Ken Shamrock and Steve Blackman.
Yes.
If they wanted to lend a bit of credibility, I guess so. Outside of that, I thought maybe, well, the whole thing was like older people or established people. And that X Division thing, I assume is for the up and coming people. Maybe someone up and coming or someone with promise or talent. Maybe even that Malice guy would have been interesting. I love Ken Shamrock, but I understand why they might need someone who looks like they'd be able to dominate for a few weeks to, like you said, bring the pay-per-view buys in week after week. They need someone with that credibility. But
it's the first champion, so they've got to have some star power. It's got to be star power. It has to be, because it's kind of like, what's this new wrestling? Oh, I don't know. Who's the champion? Yeah. Oh, Ken Shamrock. I've heard of him.
Yeah,
but if it's like Malice, what? So it has to be someone.
It has to be someone.
It's like AEW started, 4 or 5 years ago. And it was like the first champion kind of had to be Chris Jericho, you know?
Right, yeah. Okay, then that makes sense. So you're happy with the Sir Kenneth Shamrock?
I thought Shamrock was a good choice for first world champion. Obviously, he'd made a name for himself in UFC. He had been in the WWF during its kind of peak years. I always thought it was kind of a shame that Shamrock never really got a main event run. He certainly wasn't world champion in the WWF. No. I think the problem with Shamrock is just the main event talent that was around during his time was just so high, with The Rock and Austin and Mick Foley and Kane and Undertaker and Triple H, Shawn Michaels, that like that's some pretty fierce competition. I feel like if it was years later, Shamrock was around, for sure world champion. So I thought it was really cool to have him as the world champion, and the fact that he was a big star but hadn't been WCW or WWF champion kind of made this, it still seemed new, even though it was a established name. Kind of your point, you said, we want to go for something new and fresh. So it kind of felt new and fresh because we'd never seen Shamrock as a world champion before. That being said, I always think it's better to have a heel world champion to start with, because that's an easier story to tell. The first champion, we have a heel, and then for weeks or months we can tell
trying
the team,
to knock him off the
right,
perch,
or we have the baby face chasing for the belt.
Yeah,
it's kind of like we gave them the payoff on the first episode. You know what I'm saying? Like we could have had 3 or 4 movies till we get the big Rocky win, but instead it's kind of like we give you it on the first show. But the only other person I think, I mean, of course we can't really have Jarrett as the first champion because he runs the company. We had Scott Hall here, and you know how much I love Scott Hall, and he'd never been world champion in the WWF or WCW, even though he had all the tools. I think the problem with Scott Hall is just that his demons kind of obviously got in his way. Anytime they kind of started to run something with Scott, something would happen and kind of bring him right back. So it might have been kind of cool to maybe have had Scott Hall as the first champion, but I'm guessing they didn't feel like they could rely on Scott, and like not in the ring. Like in the ring he was great, but just everything else that kind of surrounded and followed Scott Hall throughout his career. I mean, he just been fired, I believe, from the WWF because of problems with either substance abuse or alcohol. So it's a shame, man. Like it gets people, you know, it really does. And I always think about that. I'm like, I feel like this episode I've been wishing for so many people to have had main event runs, but I wish I would have seen Scott Hall as a world champion, because he was one of my favorites as all time. I think him as WWF world champion as Razor Ramon in like 94 could have been amazing.
That would have been lovely, wouldn't it?
But we never got that.
Never got it.
But yeah, I think the only other person I think we could have really seen as world champion here would have been Scott Hall. But I think Ken Shamrock was a good shout.
Okay. Mr. Steamboat. Aged very well. Lovely head of hair. Very trim. Good shape. Great wrestler. Also, I went back. He absolutely did tag. And I've got a reaction video of that. And
Which you still haven't sent me.
I would like to now officially apologize to Mr. Steamboat, Mr. Bulldog, and Mr. the referee, because I kind of insinuated that they didn't know that by saying what I said, right? So I definitely want to apologize to those three. I want to apologize to you for,
You should
bringing the name of Chillin With The Villain, dragging it through the mud with my awful observation skills and cockiness. I would also definitely like to apologize to Steve, our fan Steve, who went all the way to New Jersey, to let you know about my error. Nobody should have to go to Jersey, especially after something like my mistake. So I definitely want to apologize to Steve, Ricky Steamboat, British Bulldog, the referee, and you. I was absolutely wrong. I watched it back. The tag. So him and Bulldog go to tag, and then Bulldog changes his mind and goes and quickly does something else. And I think I looked away then, but then he does immediately turn back, and there's the clearest tag ever. And then he comes in. I just must have missed that, but I watched it back. I'm 100% wrong.
Well, watching it would have helped.
I did watch it, and then I looked away.
You just said you looked away.
All right, I won't look up. You know, in the Clockwork Orange, when his eyes are clamped open. That's what I need. Someone can just give me drops. But Mr. Steamboat, terrific wrestler, very good at tagging in and being legal and knowing the rules of the craft. Lovely head of hair. Awful referee. Just lets Ken Shamrock get away with murder. Malice is holding onto the ropes. And he goes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You got just absolutely lets him get away with whatever he wants. Yeah, it does a friggin' 10 count on it.
I thought you were going to say they're doing the in-ring introductions for Malice and Ken Shamrock, and they introduce Ricky Steamboat again, and they get the camera on him, and as they're saying, former or legend, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, he's just there wiping his nose, his finger across his face. He's just wiping. I'm like, what are you doing? You must realize the camera's on you now. And I was like, is he trying to do a signal to someone or something? I was like, what is he doing? Very odd.
Oh, yeah. You know,
odd.
I like my when wrestlers need to blow their nose, like last week with Virgil. Yeah, I should have mentioned that.
It was.
Yeah, his 10 count when he was holding onto the ropes just made me laugh. Just, Ricky, get in there. You're still in great shape.
So, in the end, Ken Shamrock defeats Malice, who's with James Mitchell, in 5 minutes and 47 seconds to become the first ever TNA champion. Or actually, maybe that's not right. He just became the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. So it's before TNA had their own belts. But we can't end the show on Ken Shamrock winning. We have to get a little bit more of Double J, which I'm not saying that in a way to rag on Jeff Jarrett.
Mm-hmm.
They've got to sell a pay-per-view next week, so we've got to have the episodic TV. So backstage, Jeff Jarrett is exchanging some heated words with a drunk Jackie Fargo again and Toby Keith before heading back to ringside. And basically he repeats the same thing that he said earlier in the show, that a battle royal was a stupid way to crown champion. He then gets a little physical with the NWA legends. Yeah. And then Jackie Fargo comes out and makes an announcement that next week the main event will be Scott Hall versus Jeff Jarrett. Mm-hmm. So that's the way we go off the air.
And finally, Ed Ferrara says something so offensive that
I'm
gonna mention,
that was, I know what you're talking. I guess crazy. It's on. Well, it's funny. So we haven't brought this up actually. This episode, if you want to watch it to kind of accompany this podcast episode, is on YouTube. TNA Wrestling or Impact Wrestling they have put it on for free on YouTube.
Yes.
If you just type in first ever TNA pay-per-view or first ever TNA show, it will come up. And we watched it on there. But yeah,
if WWE did that, they would have sanitized it to hell, right? This
Right.
was as it aired, I am assuming, because my word, he says that battle royal, I'm not going to say the word, is like the Special Olympics. Even if you win, you have to be the R word to do it, which is like, even back then was.
I didn't even get what he was. Why would they be the R word to win that match? I didn't even get it. It felt like he just wanted to say,
yeah. Well, yeah, he was saying like you'd have to be the R word to agree to go in that Special Olympics, because even if you win, you're still the R word.
So everyone's just burying this battle royal, their first main event of the show. Mm-hmm. Oh my dude. Yeah, Ed Ferrara came out with a whole. He was a horrible commentator.
Yeah.
You know what? So we've gone through the whole show, and all the things that we spoke about, not all of it, but a lot of it, I'm just like, oh, this was bad. This was bad. This was bad. And not just bad, but like, oh man, this was, not tasteful, or this was.
That's the thing, yeah.
But like, this was a really dumb idea. So like, not bad in the sense like, oh, this is so boring. Like, I'm just not interested. But a lot of it just bad. But saying that, I still felt like I was relatively entertained by the show as a whole.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of stuff that we talk about in previous episodes as well that hasn't aged well. It's never actually been like really mean spirited. It's just been, a thing of its times. But it got a lot of the commentary got like a little bit mean spirited, especially that last one. So what's the point,
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm feeling that for you, this pay-per-view was almost giving, well, there were some good moments, but it was almost giving you sort of like WCW Thunder vibes, where it was still entertaining.
Right, yeah.
Like, you're never bored?
You're never bored, yeah. I think that's like the biggest criticism of TNA when it started, was just that they obviously tried to not be another WCW, but as much as they tried, it still came across like a sort of WCW.
Like, yeah.
But I think the biggest criticism of this is it's so Southern wrestling. The show is so Southern, right?
Yeah, no, it totally is. Incidentally, I thought that they had their octagon shaped ring like since day one, so I learned something about TNA.
Yeah, not to quite a few years or so.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is going to be a difficult one to judge, to like give stars for, isn't it? Because
should we go with our favorite match first?
Yeah, when you said that the Battle Royale was like, oh, it's the best, I was like, what? You're
no.
insane. But then you clarified what you said. For me, obviously, the first match was, I mean, like you said, I wouldn't recommend the pay-per-view, but I would recommend people dig out that match. The first match with the Flying Elvises and low-key AJ Styles and Jerry Lynn was the highlight of the night for me, match-wise and in every aspect.
What is good about this is obviously the feedback of the show at the time was probably the same as what you just said then. And as they moved on, it seemed to become more stuff like that and less of
they headed in that direction. Yeah.
Like it seemed to get rid of the dicks pretty quickly and the hillbillies and everything else. And, TNA has been known for some great wrestling over the years, and they produced a lot of talent, or at least gave talent their first sort of exposure to mainstream wrestling. I mean, when I think of TNA, of course, I think of AJ Styles. Of course, I think of Samoa Joe. Even though he kind of got his name in Ring of Honor first, but still Samoa Joe, Christopher Daniels, LAX, the Motor City Machine Guns, a whole bunch of talent from TNA. Plus, like I said, like I feel like Kurt Angle did some of his best work ever in TNA. So I do think TNA doesn't really get the credit that it deserves, because at one point TNA was super hot. One point TNA was doing like 2 million viewers a week, and like and everyone crapped on it, and that's like more than AEW does now, you know. And I guess you could argue TV has changed and whatnot, but like TNA was you know, it was going to the UK doing really successful tours and everything else. But yeah, I feel like people kind of rag on TNA, and I feel like should it end tomorrow, everyone would be like, oh, I wish we would appreciate TNA more. But there we go. But yeah, for me, favorite match, or the best match, should I say, obviously the Flying Elvis's 6-man tag. I did enjoy the Battle Royal, but for reasons that I give, I think you were kind of harsh on it. I thought it was perfectly fine Battle Royal, and I even enjoyed Shamrock and Malice going at it at the end. Again, maybe I just enjoyed it more because it was compared to the crap on early in the show. To give this thing a star rating,
whoa, we got to do our least favorite match.
Least favorite match, yeah, the Dicks.
Yeah,
the Johnsons.
I mean, it's like pick one, because after that you had the Dupps. They had the Dupps, right? So you had back-to-back 2 tag team matches that ended with the exact same finish as each other, with just terrible gimmicks. So just choose one. Like, you choose. Which one did you choose? I'll just choose the other because it doesn't matter.
I went with the Johnsons. Yeah,
Dupps for me. Okay. Fine. Stars,
dude. When after I watched this, I was like, I think I might give this show 3 stars. But now I've gone through it, I'm like, it all reads so terrible.
3 stars.
But I'm pretty sure when I watched it, I was relatively entertained. Bear in mind as well, let's give them a bone. Like, this is the first ever show they did. Like, obviously nowhere near perfect yet already. So, I bet, yeah, now, having gone through a review, I was still entertained. So there was a lot of bad stuff on it, but I still watched it and was like entertained. It wasn't boring. So I'm going to call it right down the middle. 2.5 from the Villain.
Wow. Okay, that seems very generous. Very generous. I'm thinking you've lost the plot. That's
Dude,
crazy.
we got to see that the 6-man was awesome. Like, there was some, I don't know, there was some, oh, actually.
The 6-man was awesome. But we gave Heatwave 98 2 out of 5 because we said if you go back and watch it, it hasn't aged well. How does that not apply to this even more so, perhaps?
I don't know. Maybe I just feel a bit more nostalgic with this. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. This is tough. So I think at the time it got decent reviews. I'm sticking with my 2.5.
You're going for 2.5, are you? Okay.
You know what? I'm going to give it 3 stars.
You're insane.
What do you got for it then, Sam?
Are you serious?
No, I'm 2.5.
Okay. To say you've lost the plot by now. That is something else. I think if you want me to do a 0.5, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to say 2. I was going to say 1.5, but because it was worse than ECW Heatwave 98. But yeah, it had to. I did think so. We had one great match, and yes, it had a lot of teething problems, and it was, and even when it was just abhorrent, it was still entertaining. The what are they called?
The Johnsons.
The Johnsons. But it wasn't as good as Heatwave 98. But I think I'm going to give it a 2 because are we being too kind to give it is having teething problems, bear with us, to a 20-year-old
It's their first show. Give them a chance. You know?
Right.
First show.
I did give them a chance. The first match was awesome, so that's enough. If that first match didn't exist, I would be giving it a 1. I'm going to give it a 2.
Here's the thing, right? The reason why I give it the 2.5 or whatever, I was pretty entertained. Even when it was like really bad, like the Johnsons or the whatever, I'm still like, I don't know. The matches are quick. It's still kind of funny to watch. Like, oh my God, they had 2 wrestlers dressed up as dicks. Like, what the hell? This is terrible, whatever. But it's still like enough going on in my brain to make it kind of entertaining rather than like the worst thing for me is a wrestling show that's boring.
Boring, yeah.
You know?
And we've always said that. And my normal metric is what percent was I entertained. Right. I actually wasn't entertained all the way through. I did actually find that Battle Royale pretty boring. again, the commentary was terrible. Maybe because last week we just had Bobby Heenan, so that's fresh in my mind. So that's a huge gulf when you think about it. But the commentary sucked. The commentary team sucked, I thought. I was bored towards the end of it. One great match, but the rest of it was reasonably entertaining. I think 2 is fair. I'm being kind. It was bad.
Well, I feel like we need to. There's like so many different eras of TNA, and like all completely different. So I think we need to do some more. It'd be fun to take a look at a different year of TNA. Maybe when TNA was blowing up, maybe in 2007, 2008.
Sure.
I would like to do that. I'd like to do maybe
like with ECW. This hasn't scared me off. Yeah.
No, I'd like to do maybe like the first Samoa German Cut Angle match. I think it was No Surrender. I might be wrong, but we'll definitely cover some more TNA. Sam, what do you want to review next week?
I'm gonna have to. I want to go really safe in something that not necessarily everybody loves, but we just know we're going to be in a good time for. Something awesome.
An old friend of mine, Jordan Collins, was messaging me, and he was telling me that he listens to the show, and I said, "Cool. What do you want us to review?" And
His
he
name
said,
"Rings a bell." Did he go to school with us? 6'4".
Yes, you may have met him.
And well, I'd say.
But anyway,
I don't wanna dox him, but yeah.
He wanted us to review Unforgiven 1998, which is the Undertaker and Kane Inferno match. So,
oh yeah, Jordan. Shall we?
I thought that might be a good shout.
Yeah. Oh, that would be a good one. Yeah.
Well, we've dedicated ourselves to it now, so
we've done it now. Yeah. Man,
all right.
I'll tell you what though. Now, so you gave this 2 out of 5, 2.5 out of 5. I've given it 2 out of 5, so it's now got 2.25 out of 5, which is better than Heatwave 98. The ECW guys are gonna kill us.
TNA better than ECW.
Oh, no.
And TNA it's still around now. ECW went out of business years ago, so
it's all Francine's fault.
It's all Francine's fault, right, Sam?
All right. We are going to have a good week next week. I really feel it with Unforgiven.
We're going to be on fire. Anyway. On fire, yes. Baby.
I like what you did there. All right, then. Well, thanks, guys. Have a good week. Till next week.